Chapter 241. Shu Jin looked at Lin Sun playfully, as if saying, "Boy, you're on your own," which made Lin Sun's hair stand on end. Fortunately, Shu Jin got down to business and said, "It's not a big deal to cripple Huang Jianxiong if you have the Mad Lady to stand up for you. Those aristocratic forces have no shortage of juniors. You'll understand in the future that it's not easy being a descendant of an aristocratic clan. In order to fight for power and profit, brothers often want to kill each other and sisters become enemies. There are countless dirty and dark things." After a pause, he continued, "Like Huang Jianxiong, he ranks 7th in the clan and is not a direct descendant. Even if you kill him, as long as someone comes forward to help you, it will be enough to turn a big problem into a small one." Lin Sun nodded. He had also heard that the more powerful the aristocratic family was, the more cruel the internal competition was. In order to seize more resources, it was not uncommon for the descendants of the aristocratic family to kill each other. However, even if that's the case, it's still better for you to be careful. In the eyes of those great clan's disciples, your status is too low, and you've crippled one of their companions. This won't be easily resolved. Shu Jin reminded him again. Lin sneered, "What do you mean by my status is not high? It's nothing more than these guys trying to maintain their so-called dignity and face. If they really dare to be unforgiving, I don't mind killing more people." Shu Jin didn't express an opinion. In fact, deep in his heart, he still appreciated Lin's ruthlessness. "No matter what kind of descendant you were, if you provoked me, I would still kill you." "Of course." Lin changed the subject. "Before I repair the ancient rhythm ocarina, Granny Wind will not watch me be killed by them. That's enough." Shu Jin smiled and said, "Then I'm curious. When can you repair the ancient rhythm ocarina?" Lin smiled and said, "It's hard to say." Shu Jin couldn't help laughing and raised his thumb. "Great. You used the protection of the crazy woman as a weapon. Even I have to admire your courage." Lin Sun looked puzzled. "Did I?" Shu Jin said impatiently, "Don't play dumb. Do you really think I don't know what you are thinking? I doubt that you can repair the ancient rhythm ocarina before the province test." Lin Sun got up with a smile and walked to his room, saying, "This is what you said. I've never admitted it." Shu Jin snorted coldly. "You little brat, I know what kind of shit you want to shit just by sticking out your butt." "Vulgar." Lin Sun rolled his eyes and slammed the door. At the same time, in the quiet courtyard of the Emerald Tea Pavilion, a string of laughter that sounded like the sounds of nature resounded, sweet and ethereal. Lu Qinyan laughed so hard that her shoulders trembled, and her eyes curved into a pair of crescent moons. She said, I didn't expect that child Lin Sun was so treacherous. It's the first time for me to see you so angry. Haha, it's so funny." Lu Qinyan really didn't expect that Lin Sun was so cunning that Granny Wind had to pinch her nose and admit it. This was so novel. In the past, the younger generation that Lu Qinyan had contact with were either graceful, calm and elegant, or modest and polite. All of them were dragons and phoenixes among men. Only Lin Sun, who seemed to be a handsome, gentle and harmless person, was so cunning that he could make Granny Wind suffer a loss. This was not something that ordinary people could do. But soon, when she noticed that Granny Wind's face was a little embarrassed, Lu Qinyan immediately stopped laughing and secretly stuck out her tongue, saying, "Granny, I'm sorry to make you feel wronged." Granny Wind said, "I'm not wronged. But this boy dared to plot against me. If I don't teach him a lesson, I'm afraid he will be more dishonest." Lu Qinyan couldn't help laughing again and joked, "Yes, I have to teach him a lesson. It's really bad that he dared to make you angry." Granny Wind glared at Lu Qinyan and said, "I'm not joking. Miss, you have to be careful. This little bastard is very cunning. In my opinion, if I don't teach him a lesson, he won't be so honest to repair the ancient rhythm ocarina." Lu Qinyan was stunned. "Haven't you promised to pay him?" Granny Wind sighed and said, "Miss, you are wrong about this little bastard. In my opinion, he will definitely help you repair the ancient rhythm ocarina, but it may take a long time. Lu Qinyan became more and more confused. Why? Granny Wen sneered. It's very simple. This boy is also worried that someone will trouble him after he abolishes Huang Jianxiong's cultivation. As long as he doesn't repair the ancient rhythm ocarina, I will naturally not let him die. With how cunning he is, he will definitely take advantage of this and let me act as his protective umbrella. So, miss, do you think he will repair the ancient rhythm ocarina soon? Lu Qinyan was speechless and said, this is also Child Lin's means of self-protection. After all, he is different from those aristocratic children. If he doesn't want to be troubled, he can only use this method. Granny Wen suddenly became alert. Miss, why do you start to think about this bastard? You have just met him once. Is it? Lu Qinyan blushed and said, Granny, this is human nature. It's not as complicated as you think. Granny Wen said, Oh, I'm relieved. Lu Qinyan asked curiously, Granny, how are you going to make Child Lin suffer? Granny Wen's eyes were suddenly filled with a touch of pride. She said, Miss, just wait for the good news. 7 days later, someone will teach that kid a lesson. If he can survive, I don't mind being used by him once. If he can't, he'll have to fix your ancient rhythm ocarina first. Lu Qinyan said worriedly, Granny, you can't embarrass Child Lin too much. It's not good if you completely hurt his face. Granny Wen twitched her lips and said, Miss, don't worry. At least he won't lose his life. Sitting in his room, Lin soon stopped smiling and his eyes were full of contemplation. There were too many things that happened today. If you just carefully thought about it, there were only 3 things. One was the impact that Huang Jianxiong might bring to himself after being disabled. The other was helping Lu Qinyan repair the ancient rhythm ocarina. As for the third, inadvertently, Lin Sun's fingers touched his throat again, thinking of young Sword King Shai Yutong and the sword against his throat. Little ant, if you overestimate yourself, you will bring yourself a fatal disaster. This sentence was Shai Yutong's warning, full of a kind of superior indifference, which was a kind of disdain released from the bones. After a long silence, Lin Sun took a deep breath and his black eyes returned to calm. He murmured, One day, I will let you taste this feeling. Chirp. At this time, there was a fluctuation in the palm of Lin Sun's hand, and Chirp rushed out with a clear cry. Its round body kept rolling in front of Lin Sun. Lin Sun was moved and said, Chirp, you came at the right time. Let's start working. As he said, he took out the prepared spiritual materials and spiritual ink one by one and arranged them in front of him in an orderly manner. Now that there were more and more things to do, Lin Sun had to hurry up and refine a suitable saber for himself as soon as possible. And Chirp, who had smashing star golden fire, would play a vital role in this refining. As he said, Lin Sun took out a furnace and walked out of the room with Chirp. This furnace was a first-rate furnace called the 9 smelting furnace. It was specially prepared for smelting materials for sabers. Clatter, Lin Sun poured all the prepared spiritual materials into the 9 smelting furnace, and then patted Chirp's little butt and said, Come on, smelt all these things for me. Chirp looked confused and didn't understand what Lin Sun was talking about. Lin Sun could only gesture with his hands and explain for a long time, which made Chirp understand. The little guy was excited. He opened his mouth and sprayed a ball of golden spiritual fire into the 9 smelting furnace. There was a faint star-like luster flowing in the flame, which was very beautiful. This was smashing star golden fire, a rare heaven-rank strange fire. Boom! In an instant, the 9 smelting furnace shook violently and started to operate. There were dense spiritual tattoo formations in the furnace. At this moment, a bright halo lit up and completely covered the spiritual materials that had been poured into the furnace. Well done! Lin Sun praised Chirp, which made the little guy very happy. He opened his mouth and sprayed several mouthfuls of smashing star golden fire into the furnace. Suddenly, a golden pillar of fire rose from the furnace, making the nearby air seem to be burning and evaporating, producing billowing white mist, which could be called golden fire. Lin Sun was shocked and quickly stopped Chirp, saying, "Take your time. Don't worry. The fire doesn't need to be too high, but the temperature must be maintained, just like now." He talked a lot and didn't care whether Chirp could understand him or not. Shu Jin was already alarmed and came over. Seeing this, he couldn't help asking in surprise, "Are you going to start refining the saber now?" Lin Sun nodded and immediately thought of something. He said, "Old Jin, do me a favor and watch Chirp spit fire. Don't waste this furnace of spiritual materials." Shu Jin was stunned. "How can I know these things?" Lin Sun said casually, "This is the material needed to cast the saber. It's very simple. You just watch the furnace and don't let it explode." Then, he turned and hurried into the house. He needed to prepare the spiritual ink. After the embryo of the saber was refined, he would immediately inscribe the spiritual tattoo formations on it. Shu Jin was stunned. He suddenly noticed that Lin Sun seemed to have become a completely different person at this moment, and there was an indescribable concentration and dignified expression between his brows. It was as if he was the overlord that controlled everything in the Tao of spirit tattoos, and he was filled with arrogance and confidence. It turns out that this boy has such a side. Shu Jin's heart moved. He was more confident that Lin Sun would help him refine the armor with spiritual tattoos in the future. Chapter 242. The door was closed, so Shu Jin couldn't know what Lin was busy with. But he knew clearly that this saber was very important to Lin. He had heard about it from Lin many days ago. For this reason, Lin specially asked him about the structure and characteristics of the saber. As a strong man with rich combat experience, Shu Jin had seen countless spiritual sabers in his life. But he didn't know what kind of saber Lin wanted to refine, since Lin had to ask him about such a trivial problem. At this time, looking at the many spiritual materials in the 9 smelting furnace, and Chirps who was concentrating on controlling the fire, Shu Jin became more and more curious. He could vaguely feel that the saber Lin was going to refine this time was completely different from the ones he had seen before. In other words, in Lin's hands, it was very likely to give birth to a new type of saber unprecedented in the Empire. Rumble, as time went on, the 9 smelting furnace continued to boil, producing a roar like a tide. The dazzling fire waves gushed out. It could be clearly seen that all kinds of spiritual materials had begun to melt gradually at this time, turning into various illusory liquids such as red, indigo, cyan, white, aqua, and purple, which were so beautiful that it made people's hearts tremble. It was the first time for Shu Jin to witness the process of refining spiritual materials. Seeing such a magical and dreamy scene, he couldn't help being stunned. This was the means of a spiritual tattooist. It was like the work of the gods, and it seized the fortune of the heavens and the earth, causing the various spirit materials that originally seemed to be inconspicuous to suddenly reveal a miraculous aura. Whoosh whoosh, every once in a while, Chirps would spray a mouthful of smashing star golden fire into the 9 smelting furnace. Although it was the first time for Chirps to do this, it could now control the fire skillfully. Under its control, the temperature of the spiritual fire in the 9 smelting furnace was perfectly maintained at an optimal state. This made Shu Jin, who was quite worried, completely relaxed. As he said before, Chirps with smashing star golden fire was a born smelting master. In this world, other smelting masters had to use complicated spiritual tattoo formations to control the temperature of the spiritual fire, and the higher the quality of the spiritual fire, the more difficult it was to control, which brought a great burden to the smelting masters. For example, a heaven-grade spirit flame usually required the cooperation of several smelting grandmasters in order to fully control it and bring out its best effect. But to Qiuqiu, there was no need to go through so much trouble. A rare heaven-rank spiritual fire like the shattered star golden flames was like a part of its body, and it could control it at will. When the two were compared, Chiuchiu's brilliance was immediately highlighted. Shu Jin even thought that if those old guys from the Academy of Spiritual Implements knew about Chiuchiu's power, they would be so jealous that their eyes would turn red. Just like that, time passed quickly, and before he knew it, night had arrived. The various spirit materials in the 9 smelting furnace had already been completely melted. All the impurities had been removed, leaving behind the purest essence. At this time, Chiuchiu had already spat out countless mouthfuls of fragmentary star golden flames, and it was clearly a little weak. Its round, ball-like body was constantly panting, as if it would collapse at any time. But at this moment the little guy showed a kind of tenacity, and its dark and round eyes were full of concentration. This made Shu Jin feel distressed and surprised. He didn't expect that Chiuchiu, who looked stupid and cute, was so fierce, just like Lin Sun. If Chiuchiu wasn't a spiritual beast, Shu Jin would doubt whether they were father and son. Boom! Suddenly, a strange sound came from the 9 smelting furnace. All kinds of spiritual materials that had been completely melted into liquid were now covered by a spiritual tattoo, producing an amazing change. Shu Jin suddenly widened his eyes and saw that in the furnace, a peculiar saber embryo was gradually taking shape. The fire was dense, and the spiritual tattoo was flowing, looking mysterious and dazzling. At this moment, the door that had been closed for a day was opened, and Lin Sun strode out. When he saw this scene, a gleam of light flashed through his black eyes. "Chiuchiu, it's done," Lin Sun said. Chiuchiu seemed to be relieved. It took a deep breath and swallowed all the fragmentary star golden flames in the 9 smelting furnace. At the same time, Lin Sun made a spiritual incantation. In the rain of light, the 9 smelting furnace suddenly stopped running and fell silent. Shu Jin couldn't help approaching. Lin Sun casually took out a black saber with a length of 2 feet and 7 inches, 4 fingers wide, from the furnace. It looked ordinary, but the blade was quite unique. The blade was as thin as a cicada's wing, and the edge was like a perfect arc. In the center of the blade there was a straight blood groove, which went straight to the tip of the blade, as if it wanted to drink blood. Shu Jin's eyelids twitched. Just by looking at the shape, he knew that this saber was a killing weapon. The perfect arc of the blade and the blood groove on the blade were all for the purpose of killing the enemy more effectively and directly. On the whole, compared with other more exaggerated and ferocious sabers, this saber was not amazing and even seemed ordinary. But when you looked at it carefully, you would find that although this saber was not engraved with spiritual tattoos and couldn't be called a real spiritual weapon, the blade had shown a kind of threatening fierceness. It was like a dormant beast, and once it woke up, it would drink blood. What kind of saber was this? Shu Jin couldn't help being curious. But when he wanted to ask, he saw that Lin Sun had hurried back to the room with the saber embryo. Bang! The door was closed, blocking Shu Jin's sight. He was stunned. Were all spiritual tattooists at work like this? Chiuchiu lay on the ground and gasped for breath like a soft cake, making a weak chirping sound. It seemed that Chiuchiu was exhausted. Shu Jin felt distressed and scolded Lin Sun for being heartless. Lin Sun took the saber and left without saying a word. Chiuchiu was really heartless. If it weren't for Chiuchiu's help, how could he smelt the saber embryo so quickly? Come on, let's drink. Shu Jin scratched his head, took out a jar of soul-burning liquor, and handed it to Chiuchiu. Chiuchiu shook its head and looked at Shu Jin pitifully with its pure black eyes. Shu Jin was stunned. He quickly took out a piece of green-white spiritual crystal and stuffed it into Chiuchiu's mouth. The little guy immediately cheered, and with a crunch, it swallowed the high-grade precious crystal that was worth 100 gold coins into its stomach. Soon after, it jumped up with a swoosh. Flames surged around its body, and it continuously chirped loudly like a happy child. Shu Jin couldn't help laughing. But when he thought that all this should have been done by Lin Sun, but he, a bystander, had to pay a piece of green-white spiritual crystal for it, his face suddenly became a little ugly. Looking at Chiuchiu, he murmured in his heart, "Could it be that the boy has already schemed against me? Otherwise, how could he be so calm when he saw Chiuchiu so weak just now?" This time, Shu Jin really wronged Lin Sun. Like other spiritual tattooists, once Lin Sun started to work, he completely devoted himself to the refining without any distractions in his mind. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was completely oblivious to himself. Just like at this moment, he sat upright at the desk, picked up the inscribing pen, dipped it in the prepared spiritual ink, and began to inscribe spiritual tattoos on the saber embryo with all his heart and soul. The saber Lin Sun made for himself this time was a pioneering work that had never been done before. The material of the saber, the spiritual ink needed for inscribing spiritual tattoos, and the spiritual tattoo pattern required were all conceived and finalized by him. Every single minute step had been repeatedly deduced by him countless times, and it was all for the sake of preventing the slightest mistake during the refinement process. After all, there was no experience to follow in refining this saber. He had to complete everything by himself. Once he made a mistake, all the previous efforts and preparations would be in vain. Lin Sun was a spiritual tattooist who was extremely strict with himself on spiritual tattoos. This quality was inherited from Master Lu, so he would be fully prepared before every refining. As a popular saying went, the attitude of being picky and pursuing perfection was the supreme belief of every spiritual tattooist all his life. Swish, 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 he waved the inscribing pen, and the tip of the pen was as smooth as flowing water, sketching out mysterious and light traces of spiritual tattoos. Like slowly blooming fireworks, they were imprinted on the surface of the saber. Lin Sun's inscribing technique was calm and simple, vaguely like a towering mountain, but his movements were free and unrestrained, full of the style of the surging sea. This kind of inscribing style was formed after countless tempering, self-harsh corrections, and countless rebukes and instructions from Master Lu. It was not very mysterious, but it was the most suitable technique for Lin Sun. All this enabled Lin Sun to maintain an unprecedented precision, conciseness and agility when inscribing spiritual tattoos. He could maximize the compatibility of spiritual ink and perceptual power, so that the spiritual tattoos he inscribed could produce the most wonderful effect. However, all the spiritual tattoos he inscribed were different from before. Lin Sun prepared a total of 49 spiritual tattoos. As the saying goes, there are 50 great ways, 49 heaven's birth, and only one of them. The number of 49 coincided with the circulation technique. It was undoubtedly extremely difficult for Lin Sun to make these 49 spiritual tattoos echo with each other, which was far more difficult than before. However, it seemed that everything was still under Lin Sun's control. Time passed quickly. The sun rose and the moon set. 3 days had passed unknowingly. Lin Sun kept the same posture without eating, drinking, sleeping, or sleeping. So far, he had inscribed 48 spiritual tattoos. He was refining the last spiritual tattoo. However, his face was pale at the moment, and there was faint sweat on his forehead. Although his eyes remained focused and calm as usual, it was obvious that he was about to collapse. In his body, the incomparably strong spiritual energy was already on the verge of exhaustion, and the power of spiritual perception was also seriously consumed. From the inside to the outside there was a feeling of exhaustion. The situation was really serious. What Lin Sun had deduced up to now was far more complicated and difficult than he had imagined when he put it into practice. Even if he couldn't hold on at this moment, all his previous efforts would be in vain. Chapter 243. There seemed to be countless spiritual tattoos buzzing in his mind, like thousands of bees flapping their wings, which made Lin Sun a little irritable. He took a deep breath, constantly analyzing his previous ideas and deductions, trying to find out the reason. Why didn't he have any problem when inscribing the previous 48 spiritual tattoos, but encountered a problem on the last one? What was the problem? Was it that the spiritual tattoos he had mastered were far from enough to inscribe such complicated spiritual tattoos, or that he neglected some hidden details in the process of inscribing? The problem was right in front of him, like the last straw to determine success or failure. If he could grasp it, he would succeed. If not, all his previous efforts would be in vain. At this moment, Lin soon bit the tip of his tongue, trying to get rid of all the messy thoughts in his mind, and began to sort out all the refining process. After a long time, Lin Sun's heart thumped, and his face changed slightly. He finally grasped the key point. The problem was in the last spiritual tattoo. In the original deduction, the last spiritual tattoo was the finishing touch, which played the role of connecting and echoing other spiritual tattoos. If the other spiritual tattoos were a pile of scattered pearls, the last spiritual tattoo was like a line, which played the role of stringing the pearls together. But now there was a problem with this line. However, the spiritual tattoo had already taken shape. If he wanted to change this line, he had to overturn all the previous efforts. If he didn't change it, the refining would definitely fail. What should he do? Lin Sun's heart sank. He never thought that the idea he had deduced countless times would make a mistake at the last moment. Was he careless? No. Lin Sun had already deduced all kinds of situations, but he didn't expect that there would be a certain gap when he put the idea into practice. And this gap became the fuse that determined the success or failure at this moment. What should he do? Should he give up like this? Lin Sun's mind was working crazily. His face became paler and paler, and his body was soaked with sweat. Obviously, his condition was getting worse. The fixed spiritual tattoo couldn't be replaced. Could he change the track of the spiritual tattoo and make it play another role? Suddenly, Lin Sun remembered the scene when he entered the heaven accessing place for the first time and passed the first test of Green Cloud Path. The checkpoint was called Spirit Refinement. As long as one could comprehend and master a flowing light spiritual rune, they would be able to pass the checkpoint smoothly. After Lin Sun passed the test, he knew that the meditating magic he obtained was hidden in the flowing light spiritual tattoo. For this reason, he was still amazed by the person who created this flowing light spiritual rune. It was unparalleled to be able to integrate an inherited cultivation method into a spiritual rune pattern. But later, Lin Sun gradually forgot about it. Now that he was in a desperate situation, he suddenly realized that the flowing light spiritual tattoo he had comprehended and mastered was a spiritual tattoo that could move. Every trace of the spiritual inscription was like a dancing flowing light, containing an unimaginable mysterious power. It was too unique. As everyone knew, the trace of each spiritual tattoo was fixed, so that it could have different magical effects. However, the existence of the flowing light spiritual tattoo broke the fixed way of inscribing spiritual tattoos and created a new unimaginable style. Because the traces of its spiritual tattoos could move, they circulated with each other like flowing light, which was unspeakably mysterious. In a trance, all the mysteries of flowing light spiritual tattoo seemed to emerge in Lin Sun's mind again, and a touch of enlightenment emerged in his heart. Swish, 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 the tip of Lin Sun's brush moved again, but the traces of the spiritual tattoos deviated from the original ones and became unrecognizable. It was impossible to see what kind of spiritual tattoo he was going to outline. However, as soon as these seemingly messy spiritual inscriptions appeared, they showed a kind of harmony with each other and a mysterious rhythm. Later, these spiritual tattoos became more and more like a group of fish swimming on the Saber, full of spiritual beauty. Buzz. Finally, Lin Sun's brush suddenly stopped. Suddenly, a strange buzzing sound rang out, and the countless spiritual tattoo tracks that were engraved produced an amazing change. They spread to each other and merged into the other 48 spiritual tattoo patterns that had been formed long ago like a stream of water. The whole saber suddenly lit up at this moment. Puff! At this time, Lin Sun seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. He suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, which was so eye-catching and dazzling on the black saber. Outside the room, Shu Jin was drinking alone. 3 days had passed, but there was no movement in Lin Sun's room. However, Shu Jin was not in a hurry. As far as he knew, when a spiritual tattooist inscribed spiritual tattoos, the time it took him was not fixed. Some could finish quickly, while others needed 10 days or half a month. Even when refining extremely complicated top spiritual weapons, it was not possible to succeed in a year and a half. Now only 3 days had passed, so Shu Jin had enough patience to wait. However, Shu Jin didn't know that Lin could refine 2 or 3 spiritual weapons in a day in the past. It was the first time that it took him 3 days at a time. What? Suddenly, Shu Jin narrowed his eyes and put down the wine jar in his hand. The next moment, he disappeared. Outside the gate of the courtyard, 2 figures appeared. One was an old granny with white hair, and the other was an elegant middle-aged man with a delicate beard. They were Granny Wind and Chu Feng. But at this time, Chu Feng looked depressed and bitter, like a prisoner who had confessed his guilt. He sighed from time to time, which was very unusual. Granny Wind, on the other hand, looked indifferent. She looked at the gate of the courtyard in the distance and asked, "Is Master Sun here?" Chu Feng nodded with a heavy heart. Granny Wind snorted, "Don't worry. When you see Master Sun, you can say that I forced you to do this." Chu Feng felt bitter in his heart. This was a kind of coercion. Granny Wind ignored him and went straight to the gate of the courtyard. These days, the more she thought about it, the more unwilling she was. She thought that Lin Sun was just a disciple of Master Sun, but he dared to plot against her and made her suffer a big loss. She really couldn't swallow this anger. At the same time, she also wanted to see Master Sun in person, so as to avoid any mistakes. If all this was just Lin Sun doing what he wanted, and Master Sun didn't know it at all, it would be terrible. This was also the purpose of Granny Wind's visit this time. In order to achieve this goal, she caught Chu Feng in person and played the role of a guide. Chu Feng was naturally unwilling, but he was no match for Granny Wind. After being severely threatened and tortured, Chu Feng finally gave in. There was no other way. If he didn't give in, he had no doubt that Granny Wind would definitely destroy him. Fortunately, Chu Feng knew that Shu Jin was here. As long as Shu Jin showed up, he should be able to stop the old woman. Granny Wind suddenly stopped, and a frightening cold light appeared in her turbid eyes. Almost at the same time, the burly and majestic figure of Shu Jin appeared in front of the courtyard. But when he saw Granny Wind, his rugged face twitched imperceptibly. Then he grinned and said, "I was wondering who it was. Turns out to be you, crazy woman." "Shu Jin, how come it's you?" Granny Wind narrowed her eyes in surprise. Seeing this, Chu Feng's eyes suddenly lit up. This old woman actually knew Shu Jin. Then things would be easy to deal with. "Senior Shu Jin, this Granny Wind is here to visit Master Sun," Chu Feng said hurriedly, deliberately emphasizing the 3 words, Master Sun, to remind Shu Jin that he did not reveal Lin's identity. Shu Jin didn't know whether he understood or not. At the same time, Chu Feng said to Granny Wind, "Granny Wind, you don't know that Senior Shu Jin is a good friend of Master Sun. In order to prevent Master Sun from being disturbed, Senior Shu Jin has been guarding here." This time, Granny Wind became more and more surprised. "Shu Jin, how did you suddenly become the guard of Master Sun? Haven't you been following him all the time?" Before she finished, Shu Jin interrupted her. "Don't mention the past, crazy woman. Master Sun is refining weapons in seclusion. Forgive me for not seeing you. You'd better go back." Granny Wind snorted coldly, "What if I don't go?" Shu Jin's face twitched imperceptibly again. He said with a smile, "Crazy woman, I already know your purpose. You just want to repair an ancient rhythm ocarina. Master Sun already knows about it. When he has time, he will help you as soon as possible." Granny Wind's expression relaxed. At least Shu Jin's words proved that Master Sun knew about it, which was enough. So, you also know Lin Sun, the little bastard? Since Master Sun is not available, ask him to come out to see me. Granny Wind directly asked to see Lin Sun. Shu Jin frowned and said, Crazy woman, although Lin Sun has done something wrong, you don't have to embarrass a junior like him, do you? A cold light suddenly shot out of Granny Wind's eyes. Why? You already knew about it? So, are you going to stand up for that boy? Unexpectedly, Shu Jin smiled. That boy is not qualified enough for me to stand up for him. But, are you really going to embarrass a junior? Granny Wind said expressionlessly, Not really. But this boy is too treacherous and abominable. He must be taught a lesson. Shu Jin nodded with a look of deep thought. Yes, this boy is very dishonest. He really needs to be taught a lesson. Granny Wind was stunned and immediately sneered. Shu Jin, don't be careless. Hurry up and ask this little bastard to come out. Shu Jin shook his head. I'm afraid I can't do it now. Why don't you come back in a few days? Lin Sun was at the critical moment of refining weapons. How could he be disturbed at this time? Next to her, Chu Feng also persuaded, Granny Wind, since you already know the address, you might as well come back another day. The more Lin Sun acted like this, the more suspicious Granny Wind became. Shu Jin's appearance here had already aroused her suspicions. Now that Shu Jin didn't give her any face for a little guy, Granny Wind vaguely felt that there was something fishy about this matter. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold light flowed through them. Her momentum became terrible, and there was a sign that she was about to lose her temper. Shu Jin's heart thumped, and he sighed inwardly that this crazy woman was really as difficult to deal with as before. Now he had to do it even if he didn't want to. Chu Feng couldn't help but secretly complain. He was the one who brought Granny Wind here. If something bad happened to her, how could he face Lin Sun? At this moment, a strange sound of sabers suddenly rang out, like the roar of a dragon and a tiger, going straight to the sky. In an instant, Shu Jin, Granny Wind, and Chu Feng were all shocked. Chapter 244. The sound of the saber seemed to have a life of its own, revealing a kind of transcendent spirituality, which was too unusual. Shu Jin, Granny Wind, and Chu Feng were all extremely experienced, so they instantly judged that a spiritual treasure was about to be born. Whoosh! Suddenly, colorful clouds appeared in the sky, shining brightly and reflecting the illusory shadow of a saber. All three of them couldn't help but be attracted by it, looking shocked. But in just an instant, this natural phenomenon disappeared, and it was as if nothing had happened. However, Shu Jin, Granny Wind, and Chu Feng were not calm at all. It's rumored that when a spiritual weapon is perfected, it's able to obtain the blessings of the heavens and produce a strand of perfect spirituality. It's called a spiritual treasure. I've seen such a treasure many times in these past few years, but I never imagined that I would be fated to witness the birth of a spiritual treasure today. Shu Jin's rugged cheeks were full of emotion. He looked relaxed, but in fact there was a storm in his heart. If he didn't guess wrong, this spiritual treasure was made by Lin Sun. But who could imagine that Lin Sun was only a 14-year-old spiritual tattooist? Who could have imagined that the birth of this spiritual treasure only took 3 days? If those old guys in the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire, who were proficient in spiritual tattoos, knew all this, they would be ashamed to death. Is this the means of Master Sun? You've really reached the acme of perfection and are beyond my imagination. Just the fact that you're able to refine a spirit treasure has already convinced me. Granny Wind's expression was complicated, with shock and emotion. She had never heard of the name of Master Sun before, so she didn't pay much attention to him subconsciously. It was also when Lin Sun revealed that Master Sun could repair the ancient rhythm ocarina that Granny Wind became a little interested in him. But she was more doubtful about whether Master Sun could really do it. But now that she witnessed the birth of a spiritual treasure, Granny Wind was completely convinced, and the original doubts in her heart were all eliminated. Being able to refine a spiritual treasure has proved that Master Sun has the means to refine armors with spiritual tattoos. If there is a chance, I must pay a visit to this mysterious man in person. Granny Wind sighed. Shu Jin was shocked. He also remembered a rumor in the Empire that as long as a spiritual tattooist could refine a spiritual treasure, he would be qualified to explore and refine armors with spiritual tattoos. If so, didn't it mean that Lin Sun's current attainments in spiritual tattoos had also reached such a level? Neither Shu Jin nor Granny Wind noticed that Chu Feng's expression was dull and tongue-tied at the moment. He knew very well that the so-called Master Sun was just a cover, and the real one was Lin Sun. But he never expected that Lin Sun could actually refine a spiritual treasure. This was too shocking. A teenage spiritual tattooist could achieve this. Throughout the ages, how many people in and out of the Empire could be found? Just when the three of them were all in turmoil, the gate of the courtyard was pushed open, and Lin Sun came out. Seeing him, Shu Jin and Chu Feng immediately woke up from their chaotic thoughts, but their expressions became a little weird, as if they were getting to know Lin Sun again. When Granny Wind saw Lin Sun, she seemed to have lost the intention to denounce him. But she was surprised to find that Lin Sun's face was pale and his footsteps were weak. His whole body showed a kind of listlessness, which was very unusual. It turns out that Granny Wind is here. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Lin Sun cupped his hands and smiled, his voice also becoming a little hoarse and weak. Granny Wind frowned and snorted. Little guy, it wasn't you who was refining just now. Don't pretend to be pitiful. Do you really think that I will beat you up in person? Shu Jin and Chu Feng also noticed Lin Sun's abnormality. They were a little worried at first, but after hearing Granny Wind's words, their expressions became weird again. Well, I don't want to argue with you, but there is one thing you must promise me. Granny Wind said in a low voice. Lin Sun was stunned. What do you mean? Granny Wind said coldly, of course it's about Huang Jianxiong. His cultivation was destroyed by you. Do you think it's easy to solve this matter? Shu Jin frowned and said, Crazy woman, if you have something to say, just say it. Granny Wind glanced at Shu Jin and then said to Lin Sun, It's very simple. In a few days, those young men from the aristocratic families will send a person to fight with you to settle this grievance. If you win, they have nothing to say. But if you lose, they will have to pay a price. Settle the grievance by fighting? Shu Jin sneered. After so many years, these young men from the aristocratic families are still playing this old trick. They haven't made any progress at all. Chu Feng said worriedly, Since they dare to make such a request, they will definitely send their most powerful person. In this way, how can Lin Sun be their opponent? Granny Wind said coldly, Do you think this battle will be unfair if I come forward? Shu Jin's heart moved. So, the strength of the opponent must be in the human gang realm? Granny Wind nodded, of course. Otherwise, if Shai Yutong fights, I'm afraid this boy will be defeated in one move. Granny Wind nodded, of course. Otherwise, if Shai Yutong fights, I'm afraid this boy will be defeated in one move. Lin Sun shrugged. Do I have any reason to disagree? Granny Wind shook her head resolutely. No. Lin Sun muttered helplessly. I knew it would be like this. Granny Wind looked very frank at this moment. She looked at Lin Sun with a sneer. For the sake of your Master Sun, I don't want to argue with you. But a cunning and abominable little guy like you should also learn a lesson and know that there is always someone better than you. Lin Sun said with a smile, You're right. When will this battle start? Let me make it clear that I'm not free in the near future. Granny Wind also looked as if she knew he would say so. She said, 4 days later, Shai Yutong will send the spiritual materials and remuneration for repairing the ancient rhythm ocarina on behalf of me. At that time, he will tell you the time and place of the battle. A cold light flashed in the depths of Lin Sun's eyes. Is Shai Yutong also involved in this matter? Granny Wind showed a meaningful smile and said, They are all from aristocratic forces. Do you think he will stand by and watch? Lin Sun was silent for a while. After a while, he said, "Okay, I promise. But 4 days later, let Shai Yutong go to the commune of spiritual tattooists to find me. This place is where my master lives in seclusion and can't be disturbed by outsiders." Granny Wind was stunned and nodded, "Of course." Without staying any longer, Granny Wind turned around and left. Watching her leave, Shu Jin was obviously much more relaxed. He said, "I'm really surprised that the crazy woman is so easy to talk to this time." Chu Feng immediately looked at Lin Sun with a smile and said, "It's very simple. It's because our master Sun has refined a spiritual treasure, which deterred the old woman at once and made her not dare to make trouble again." Shu Jin glanced at Chu Feng coldly. "Be careful what you say. If this woman goes crazy and wants to kill you, no one can stop her." Chu Feng suddenly shivered all over and looked embarrassed. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but laugh. "I feel that this Granny Wind is reasonable. What I fear most is meeting unreasonable people. Cut the crap. Hurry up and let me see the saber you've refined." Shu Jin had been patient for a long time. At this moment, he couldn't help but be curious and said hurriedly, "Can I have a look at this peerless spiritual treasure?" Chu Feng looked at Lin Sun hopefully. "Come on." Lin Sun turned his head and walked into the courtyard. A moment later, a black saber with a length of 2 feet and 7 inches and a width of 4 fingers appeared in Lin Sun's hand. Shu Jin frowned. This spiritual treasure seemed to be no different from the original saber embryo. But when he held it in his hand, the saber suddenly trembled as if it was resisting, and a terrible light appeared on the dark blade. Chi! Shu Jin felt a sharp pain on his fingertip. He immediately circulated his cultivation base and exerted force in his palm. Only then was he able to hold the saber in his hand. It felt like he was holding a treasure with a soul. He could clearly feel that the saber was resisting him. This alone made Shu Jin's eyes brighten. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Good treasure! It's really a spiritual treasure with a wisp of heaven's luck." Spiritual weapon and spiritual treasure were only one word apart, but their spirituality was worlds apart. Chu Feng, who was at the side, was also envious when he saw this. He stepped forward with the intention of personally feeling it. Who would have thought that before his fingers could approach, he saw the saber suddenly emit a clear cry, and the edge of the saber gushed out a wisp of incomparably sharp, ominous light. With a ripping sound, a wound was torn on the tip of Chu Feng's finger. If he hadn't dodged in time, his fingers would have almost been cut off. Chu Feng's heart trembled with embarrassment and shock. He said, "This treasure is simply a peerless murderous weapon. It's rare in the world." It was also the first time for Lin to feel the spirituality of the saber so clearly. Seeing this, he couldn't help grasping in the void. With a clang, the black saber turned into a flash of lightning and rushed into Lin's palm, as if it took the initiative to throw itself into his arms. Shu Jin and Chu Feng widened their eyes at the sight. In an instant, Lin felt that the saber in his hand seemed to have become an inseparable part of him, connected with his flesh and blood, producing a sense of complete resonance. It was as if he could feel its happiness, anger, sorrow, and happiness, and all of his thoughts could be sensed by it. It was the first time for Lin to experience this feeling, and he couldn't help but feel a little strange in his heart. Without using his cultivation, he shook his wrist and waved the saber at will. With a crack, the air was torn like silk, making a sharp sound. At the same time, a wisp of fierce light flashed on the surface of the saber. "Good saber!" Shu Jin and Chu Feng's eyes brightened with envy. Chapter 245. Shu Jin and Chu Feng. One was a strong practitioner with unparalleled fighting capacity, and the other was an experienced top-grade spiritual tattooist. They could tell at a glance that Lin's saber was too unusual. With the power of the saber itself, it could tear the air and produce a breathtaking fierce spirit, which was incomparable to other sabers. Chu Feng couldn't help taking out a black spirit saber and said with burning eyes, "Come on, chop it." Lin Sun was surprised and said, "That's not necessary. Such a black spirit saber is very expensive. If it's destroyed," Shu Jin, who was at the side, said impatiently, "I told you to cut the ridge. What's with all this nonsense?" Lin glanced at Chu Feng, who was also impatient. Without hesitation, he raised the saber in his hand and chopped it down. He did not use his cultivation in this attack, but even so, with a bang, the black spirit battle saber, which was known as a middle-rank human spiritual weapon, was easily cut into two. Shu Jin and Chu Feng's pupils shrank at once. What a terrible sharp power! Even Lin Sun couldn't help but feel surprised. He was extremely confident in the saber he refined, but it was still beyond his expectation that he could make it this far. Buzz! Lin poured the little spiritual gang energy left in his body into the saber. A strange sound like the roar of a dragon or a tiger sounded, as if a fierce beast had woken up from silence. In an instant, the saber, which was 4 feet and 7 inches long and 4 fingers wide, suddenly surged with countless bright spiritual tattoos. They flowed around the saber like tides, looking mysterious and dazzling. But soon, all these were replaced by a kind of real ominous light. The whole saber was as dark as the eternal night. The ominous light was so strong that the air around it was buzzing and trembling. Shu Jin was stunned. It was not like a spiritual weapon of human rank at all. It was no different from an earth-rank spiritual weapon. Clang! Lin withdrew his hand, and the saber became calm in an instant. The dark saber was full of mysterious and sharp spirit. Who can imagine that this is a spiritual weapon of upper grade of human rank? Who can imagine that its power can compete with an earth-rank spiritual weapon, which even the top spiritual weapon of human rank can't compare with? This is a spiritual treasure. It was born from the previous blessing, and its spirituality is extraordinary. Chu Feng's eyes were fanatical. As an experienced spiritual tattooist, he naturally knew the value of this saber at a glance. It could be called an unparalleled treasure. At this moment, the way he looked at Lin Sun changed. He admired Lin Sun so much that he wanted to worship him. At the age of 14, he had refined a spirit treasure that was different from the rest of the world. Who in the entire empire could compare to him? Give it a name, Shu Jin said. Yes. The magic of this saber is enough to be recorded in the history of spiritual tattooists. How can it not have a resounding name? Chu Feng nodded in agreement. Lin thought for a moment and said, "Let's call it Flowing Light." Inspired by the Flowing Light spiritual tattoo, this saber was finally successfully refined. The name was also very memorable for Lin Sun. This was the origin of the Flowing Light saber. In the years to come, this saber would also become famous along with Lin Sun in the empire and leave a mark of its own in the history of the empire. Because of the Flowing Light saber, Chu Feng was completely convinced by Lin Sun. He made friends with Lin Sun because of his potential before, but now he really regarded Lin Sun as a friend. Also because of the Flowing Light saber, Shu Jin looked forward to the day when Lin Sun refined the armor with spiritual tattoos for him. Perhaps it would also give him a surprise at that time? 3 days later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation. He was in high spirits, and his whole body was surging with abundant vitality. It took him 3 days to recover just to refine a saber for himself, which made Lin Sun sigh with emotion. If he hadn't thought of Flowing Light spiritual tattoo at that time, this saber would not have been born at all. If he hadn't obtained the heaven accessing place, he wouldn't have been able to comprehend and master the unique spiritual tattoo of Flowing Light spiritual tattoo, which was full of magical colors. This was the chance, full of accident. When Lin Sun walked out of the room, Shu Jin was teasing Chirps and competing with him in drinking, which made Lin Sun speechless. He was always worried that Shu Jin would infect Chirps with some bad habit. Tomorrow, Shai Yutong will come to send the letter of challenge in person. Are you ready? Shu Jin smiled and clinked his glass with chirps, asking casually. There's only one step left. Lin Sun came over, grabbed chirps, and took away the glass in the little guy's mouth. Drinking was a bad habit. Chirps acted like a spoiled child and wanted to take back the glass, but Lin Sun ruthlessly refused. In desperation, the little guy could only squat there and sulk. What's the last step? Shu Jin was stunned. With a clang, Lin Sun pulled out the flowing lightsaber and looked at Shu Jin, saying, I need to get familiar with the power of flowing lightsaber as soon as possible. Shu Jin seemed to understand and smiled. You want me to practice with you? Lin Sun smiled brightly. It's a waste of resources if I don't make full use of such a great master like you. Shu Jin smiled more and more maliciously. Okay, but I won't be merciful. Are you sure you want to do this? Lin Sun remained calm. I believe that with your cultivation and identity, you can definitely help me to do this as soon as possible. As for whether you will be merciful or not, it depends on whether you want to bully me. After all, I'm only 14 years old this year. If you bully me, it's not good to hear about it. On the contrary, if you do your best to practice with me, you can get a good reputation in the future. Shu Jin snorted, 14 years old? I've never seen a 14-year-old treacherous little guy like you. Lin Sun smiled and said nothing. That night, Lin Sun lay on the bed, gritting his teeth and gasping for breath. Shu Jin was too cruel. At this moment, his entire body was sore, and there were many red and swollen bruises in many places. Of course, Shu Jin was extremely restrained. The injuries he caused seemed insignificant, and he could recover after a good night's sleep. However, these insignificant injuries were really painful. Obviously, Shu Jin did it on purpose. When I refine armors with spiritual tattoos for you in the future, I'll let you taste this pain. Lin Sun angrily made a decision in his heart. But then again, fighting with Shu Jin for a day benefited Lin Sun a lot. He not only mastered the power of flowing lightsaber, but also practiced the six-word saberplay. Shu Jin was undoubtedly a master. Under his guidance, Lin Sun had a deeper understanding of the six-word saberplay, and was only a step away from the mastery of martial arts. Most importantly, through the fight, Shu Jin keenly perceived that the fighting methods Lin Sun had mastered were too simple, so he suggested Lin Sun to practice a punching method or palm method to defend himself in addition to practicing Taoism. According to Shu Jin, weapons were worldly possessions after all, which could be used but could never be relied on. The most fundamental thing was to tap the potential of one's own body. Lin Sun deeply agreed with this. The marching boxing he had mastered before was after all a basic punching method, and its power had reached the limit. For Lin Sun now, it was not enough. Therefore, Lin Sun immediately kept Shu Jin's advice in mind. He secretly thought that he must find a suitable punching method to practice when he had a chance. Of course, it would be better if he could get some secret books that were not available in the market. Unfortunately, there was not much hope. For example, those secret books were all inherited from the rich and powerful forces, and it was almost impossible for them to spread to the market. Lin Sun also tried to learn some punching methods from Shu Jin, but Shu Jin refused him with one sentence. The punching method I practiced is not suitable for you. Therefore, Lin Sun could only wait for an opportunity to learn a new punching method suitable for himself. The next morning, Lin Sun got up and went out. He had already made an appointment with Granny Wind to meet Shai Yutong in the commune of spiritual tattooists today. But when Lin Sun arrived at the commune of spiritual tattooists, he was surprised to find that many people had already gathered here, blocking the street. Most of them were practitioners. Some girls looked excited and frequently looked at the gate of the commune of spiritual tattooists. It turns out that that man is young Sword King, Shai Yutong. He deserves to be an influential figure in the young generation of the empire. His demeanor alone makes people feel ashamed. Ah, young Sword King is so handsome. I really want to have children with him. Humph, don't worry. I heard that there are so many women chasing after young Sword King in the forbidden city of the Empire that they can form a long street. There are many daughters of aristocratic families among them. Don't count on him." Hearing the bursts of discussion, and looking at the excited and admiring expressions of the budding girls, Lin Sun finally clearly realized that Sha Yutong was so famous in the empire. Lin Sun looked up and saw Sha Yutong standing alone in front of the commune of spiritual tattooists. He was dressed in a green robe with his hair coiled into a bun and carried a blue spiritual sword on his back. Standing there casually, he was like a dragon among men and a phoenix among men, dazzling and unparalleled. This guy had been waiting here so early and had a dignified posture. No wonder he caused a sensation in this area. Lin Sun thought that Sha Yutong was obviously not a person who liked to show off, but now he seemed to be afraid that others couldn't recognize him, which was a bit strange. But Lin Sun couldn't figure out the reason after thinking about it, so he shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Almost at this moment, a sharp gaze suddenly swept over and instantly locked on Lin Sun, making him squint his eyes. He looked up and saw Sha Yutong looking at him from a distance. Seeing this, Lin Sun no longer hesitated. He squeezed through the crowd and walked over there. Seeing Lin Sun coming over, Sha Yutong threw a storage bag to Lin Sun without saying a word. "This is the spiritual materials and remuneration that Granny Wind asked me to send." Lin Sun put it away with a "oh." At this time, the crowd nearby found that the reason why young Sword King Sha Yutong appeared here was that he was waiting for someone. Many people couldn't help but look at Lin Sun, wondering what kind of person Lin Sun was and why Sha Yutong was waiting here in person. Chapter 246. Who is this guy? Why is he treated so politely by young Sword King? He seems to be in his teens. Is he also a famous and powerful figure of the younger generation in the Empire, just like the young Sword King? It's a bit weird. Even if he is a friend of young Sword King, he doesn't have to arrange the meeting place here. It's as if we don't know. The crowd was talking about Lin Sun's origin. Even some clear-minded people had vaguely seen that the scene in front of them was a little strange. Both Lin Sun and Sha Yutong turned a blind eye to it and seemed very calm, because both of them knew the purpose of this meeting. This is a letter of challenge. 3 days later, Huang Jianchen, the elder brother of Huang Jianxiong, will be waiting for you in the arena of Mist City. Sha Yutong handed a letter of challenge printed with gorgeous cloud patterns to Lin Sun, and then turned around and left. From beginning to end, he didn't say a word of nonsense. He maintained an indifferent attitude and never showed a trace of emotion. But Lin Sun knew that this was the attitude Sha Yutong showed to him, ignoring him. Lin Sun watched Sha Yutong leave without showing any emotion. He just gently opened the letter of challenge with his fingers. There was only one sentence written on it: "One fight to settle all grievances." The handwriting was like a sword, revealing an incomparably fierce spirit, as if it would break the paper and fly out. Just by looking at the handwriting, one could know that this sentence was written by Sha Yutong. The fierce and unparalleled breath perfectly matched his temperament. Lin Sun squinted his eyes for a moment and put the letter of challenge away. Only then did he find that people nearby were whispering and looking at him with a strange look. A letter of challenge. It turns out that young Sword King came to issue the letter of challenge in person. He is not a friend of this young man. What I'm curious about is who this guy will offend. It's so unusual that Sha Yutong came out in person. Didn't you hear it? 3 days later, in the arena, Huang Jianchen. Huang Jianchen? Who is this guy? It must not be simple. Otherwise, how could young Sword King come out in person to issue the letter of challenge? Interesting. It's so interesting. 3 days later, I must go to the arena to watch this battle. The discussion was full of excitement. Sha Yutong, a well-known figure of the younger generation, suddenly appeared in Mist City and issued a challenge to a strange boy in public. This matter itself was filled with the flavor of fanciful thoughts, and it was difficult not to attract attention. Lin Sun frowned and vaguely guessed Sha Yutong's intention. "Young master, Manager Chu Feng requests your presence." At this time, a maid ran out of the commune of spiritual tattooists and led Lin to the second floor. "Brother, Sha Yutong is really ruthless," Chu Feng said angrily as soon as he saw Lin Sun. "Brother, you noticed it too?" Lin Sun asked with a smile. "As long as you're not blind, you can definitely see that Sha Yutong only sent a letter of challenge, but now he's so ostentatious, as if he's afraid that others won't know. It goes without saying that he must be taking this opportunity to tell the whole Mist City that Lin Sun will fight in the arena 3 days later." Chu Feng sneered, "That's flattery. He will take this opportunity to push you to the cusp of the storm, and then let you fall down on the day of the battle and completely lose your reputation in Mist City." Lin Sun nodded, "But Sha Yutong's action makes me guess that he is obviously very confident in Huang Jianchen. He thinks that with Huang Jianchen's means, he can defeat me in the battle." Chu Feng patted his thigh. "That's right. Think about it, the venue of the duel is the first-class arena in Mist City, which can accommodate tens of thousands of people. If you lose at that time, it will be known by everyone in Mist City within a day. So, Sha Yutong is obviously hiding evil intentions and going too far." Lin Sun smiled and said, "Since he wants to make it known to the whole city, I'll play with him. But now I'm curious about what kind of opponent Huang Jianchen is." Chu Feng frowned and thought for a while. He couldn't help shaking his head. "I haven't heard of him, but he should be a powerful figure in the Forbidden City, right?" Lin Sun frowned and said, "Brother, help me check the details of Huang Jianchen. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles." Chu Feng immediately nodded and agreed to the task. As Chu Feng analyzed, it didn't take long before it caused a stir in Mist City. Young Sword King Sha Yutong, an outstanding figure of the younger generation of the Empire, issued a letter of challenge to a young man in public today. This was definitely a sensational thing. Sha Yutong was not only an outstanding figure in cultivation and talent, but also a lineal descendant of the Xie family, one of the 7 top aristocratic families of the Empire. This identity alone was enough to attract the attention of the major forces in Mist City. However, such a dazzling figure did not hesitate to condescend to act as a middleman and personally sent a letter of challenge. It was hard not to attract people's attention. Soon new news came out. Lin Sun's identity was found out, but most people only knew that Lin Sun was a young man who was qualified to participate in the province test. A few days ago, he had defeated Qi Yunxiao and Yuan Shu in front of Mist College, which caused a lot of sensation. Only the powerful forces in Mist City knew that Lin Sun had killed many practitioners on a rainy night. He was not only extremely powerful, but also had a mysterious origin. He was a person who could never be provoked. When they learned that Sha Yutong's letter of challenge pointed at Lin Sun, these forces were immediately attracted. No one would take this matter as an ordinary trifle. Lin Sun's opponent, Huang Jianchen, was a descendant of the Huang clan, one of the aristocratic families in the Forbidden City of the Empire. In addition, there was little news about Huang Jianchen. But the more it was so, the more attractive this matter became. Whether it was Lin Sun or Huang Jianchen, for most people in Mist City, they were far less famous than Sha Yutong, the young Sword King. However, Sha Yutong was involved in this matter. This unreasonable thing made many people feel that something was different. In short, as soon as the news spread throughout Mist City, it received unprecedented attention. Many people were attracted by it. Some people even rushed to buy tickets to the arena 3 days later as fast as they could, wanting to see this unusual duel in person. In less than an hour, the tickets for the Colosseum 3 days later were all sold out. From this, one could see how much attention this duel had attracted. In an elegant room of a restaurant, when Mingxiu, Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu, and other young men from the aristocratic families of Mist City gathered together again, all looking excited. As soon as I heard about it, I immediately informed everyone to come together. The purpose is to know, will you go to watch this duel? Qi Yunxiao glanced at the crowd, unable to hide the joy between his eyebrows. Of course we will go. We dare not provoke Lin Sun, but if we can see him suffer a crushing defeat and make a fool of himself in public, who will miss this opportunity? I don't know how powerful Huang Jianchen is, but since Shai Yutang, the young Sword King, dares to stand up for him, it proves that he must think that Lin Sun can't be Huang Jianchen's opponent. Haha, Lin Sun is doomed this time. Others also responded excitedly. The forces behind them had suffered losses in the hands of Lin Sun, but because of Lin Sun's identity, they could only bear it and did not dare to retaliate. Now they had the opportunity to see how Lin Sun would make a fool of himself. Of course, they were happy to see it. Only when Mingxiu seemed very calm and said, "It's not so easy to bully Lin Sun. I'm curious, if Lin Sun wins in this duel, how will young Sword King end up?" As soon as these words came out, everyone else was stunned. No matter what, let's just wait. 3 days later, a good show will begin. This time around, it's not just us. Even the old fellows from the various factions behind us are unable to sit still. They want to personally watch this showdown. Qi Yunxiao's eyes were shining. I heard that even Governor Lu Wujuan, great practitioner Yao Tuohai, Dean of Mist College Wei Lingzhen, and Xiling Army Du Dongtu are also paying attention to this matter. I just don't know if they will go to see it in person. Everyone else laughed. They also knew about this matter. They heard that it was impossible to buy tickets to the arena 3 days later in the current market, and in the black market, a ticket like this had already been hyped up to a jaw-dropping sky-high price. It could be imagined how spectacular the scene in the arena would be when the duel began. The most urgent thing is to find out the details of Huang Jianchen. This guy is not famous in the Forbidden City. He seems to be very low-key and mysterious, but since he can be endorsed by Shai Yutang, he must be a terrible character. When Mingxiu muttered, others also nodded. They had all seen Huang Jianxiong. Although Huang Jianxiong's cultivation had long been destroyed by Lin Sun, his original combat effectiveness was also first class in the human gang realm. As Huang Jianchen, Huang Jianxiong's elder brother, was certainly not simple. Such discussions and conversations took place in every area of Mist City now. No matter which point they paid attention to, Lin Sun had become a household name. Of course, once he was defeated in the battle 3 days later, he was doomed to lose his reputation and become a well-known loser in Mist City. This was the strategy of praising first and then killing. It was an open and above-board plot. Even if it was seen by others, it would not affect Shai Yutang's reputation at all. When Lu Qingyan heard the news from Granny Wind in Green Tea Pavilion, she couldn't help biting her lips. An inexplicable anger welled up in her heart and she said, "Child Xie's action is a bit bullying." Chapter 247. Who was Huang Jianchen? Others might not know, but Lu Qingyan knew the details of this person very well. Last year, she was invited to a banquet belonging to the descendants of aristocratic families in the Forbidden City. At the banquet, there were all outstanding figures among the descendants of aristocratic families, including Huang Jianchen. This person looked extremely ordinary and inconspicuous. He sat there drinking in a low voice and did not attract attention at all. But something happened later, which left a deep impression on Lu Qingyan. At that time, in order to liven things up, some descendants of aristocratic families chose some people to practice martial arts, which made the atmosphere of the scene unprecedentedly hot. But at that time, Huang Jianchen shook his head and got up to leave directly. His move immediately caused many people's dissatisfaction. But Huang Jianchen didn't care at all. He turned around and left, which completely angered a famous aristocratic family in the field. The man was Lu Guanxing, a middle-level aristocratic family from the Lu clan. He was a talented genius and quite famous in the circle of aristocratic families. Seeing that Huang Jianchen didn't give him face, Lu Guanxing immediately stopped him and questioned him. He never thought that he, a genius with excellent combat effectiveness, was seriously injured by Huang Jianchen in one move. Suddenly, everyone was shocked and the atmosphere was dead silent. At that time, Huang Jianchen just sneered and shook his head, leaving a comment of showy but not practical, and then left. Because this matter was too shameful, in order not to offend Lu Guanxing, all the aristocratic families in the field no longer mentioned it, so not many people knew it. But as the person involved, Lu Qingyan knew this matter very well. She knew how terrible Huang Jianchen's combat effectiveness was, which was not comparable to that of ordinary aristocratic families. Under his seemingly ordinary appearance, there was actually a heart like that of a fierce beast. Once he fought, the whole person was like a bloodthirsty beast, and his breath was extremely terrifying. Now, it was said that Huang Jianchen was going to fight with Lin Sun this time, and Shai Yutong made it known to the whole city. It was obvious that Huang Jianchen wanted to completely defeat Lin Sun and ruin his reputation. This made Lu Qingyan feel a little uncomfortable. Without Lin Sun, she didn't know where to find someone to help her repair the ancient rhythm ocarina. Now, Lin Sun was regarded as an enemy and suppressed by these young men who followed her. What would Lu Qingyan think? Seeing this, Granny Wind couldn't help but frown and say, "Indeed, although it's a battle to settle the scores, it's a bit too much to make such a big fuss now. Grandma, as far as I know, although Huang Jianchen is Huang Jianxiong's brother, I'm afraid Huang Jianxiong can't invite him." Lu Qingyan suddenly asked. "Shai Yutong invited me." Granny Wind said, "Huang Jianchen may not give face to a waist, but he has to give face to Shai Yutong." Lu Qingyan frowned and thought for a long time, and finally sighed helplessly. "It has happened, and it's too late to reverse it. I only hope that Huang Jianchen will not go too far, otherwise," Granny Wind immediately said, "Don't worry, Mississippi. As long as I'm here, I won't just watch Lin Sun get killed." Lu Qingyan nodded, feeling a little depressed. She only hoped that Lin Sun could win so that nothing bad would happen again. "Old Jean, do you know Huang Jianchen?" As soon as he returned home, Lin Sun asked Shu Jin directly. "Why do you mention this boy?" Shu Jin asked in surprise. Lin Sun was surprised. He just asked casually. He didn't expect that Shu Jin had also heard of Huang Jianchen. At the moment, Lin Sun told his feelings about the duel 3 days later. "Your opponent is him?" Shu Jin frowned at once. "It seems that Shai Yutong intends to make you fall into a situation of certain defeat." Lin Sun asked, "Is this person very powerful?" Shu Jin pondered. 3 years ago, Huang Jianchen, at the age of 13, broke through to the human gang realm and condensed a rare second-grade pond of spiritual power, chain of dark prison, in his body. Although it is slightly inferior to the first-grade pond of spiritual power, he can sometimes practice some special fighting secret methods with this pond of spiritual power. The reason why I know this boy is that the pond of spiritual power he condensed can practice a kind of inherited secret method in Heiyao Shrine. Therefore, Heiyao Shrine once threw an olive branch to this boy and wanted him to practice in Heiyao Shrine. Lin Sun nodded, and then? Shu Jin's eyes flashed a strange color, then he refused. Refused? This time, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. Heiyao Shrine was an extremely mysterious and powerful force, but Huang Jianchen refused the opportunity to join Heiyao Shrine, which was puzzling. Yes, the reason for this kid's refusal is very simple. He wants to rely on himself and walk a path that is completely different from the cultivators of the world. His tone is very arrogant, but this kid's willpower is indeed extraordinary, and he isn't the type to boast. Shu Jin's words had given Lin a vague impression of Huang Jianchen, whom he had never met. It was also very clear that the people who could be noticed by Heiyao Shrine were absolutely not simple. "It seems that Shai Yutong has found me a strong opponent this time," Lin Sun thought. "Are you afraid?" Shu Jin asked. Do you think I will be afraid? Lin Sun got up with a smile, turned around and walked into his room. You are too cunning. God knows whether you are afraid or not. Shu Jin couldn't help but roll his eyes. According to his observation these days, Lin Sun's combat effectiveness was enough to fight against Huang Jianchen. The only thing that worried Shu Jin was that Huang Jianchen was from a powerful family. If he mastered some powerful secret methods, with the help of the pond of spiritual power of the chain of black prison in his body, he could burst out unimaginable power. Boy, you can only rely on yourself this time. If you win, it will be better. If you lose, it will be a lesson, Shu Jin murmured in his heart. In a closed secret room, there was a burst of roars of fierce beasts. The sound was ferocious and soul-stirring. Hearing it, the two guards in front of the secret room trembled and their faces turned pale. But it didn't take long for the roars of these fierce beasts to turn into mournful wails and finally fell silent. Bang! The tightly closed door of the chamber opened up before a young man walked out. His naked upper body was tainted with a large expanse of scarlet-red blood, and his entire body emitted a peerlessly ferocious imposing aura that caused others to feel dazed as if they'd seen a god of death that had walked out from hell. Seeing the teenager, the two servants became more frightened, and their eyes showed deep fear, as if facing this teenager was more terrible than hearing the roars of the fierce beasts just now. The teenager took a snow-white towel from the hands of a servant expressionlessly, wiped the blood stains on his skin, and then said indifferently, "Go deal with it." As he spoke, he had already put on his clothes and was walking towards the outside. The two servants suddenly breathed a long sigh of relief. They looked at each other and could see the fear in each other's eyes. Immediately, they walked into the secret room. At a glance, they saw the blood all over the ground and the corpses of three fierce beasts, a wind-blade snow wolf, a cold-armored giant python, and a giant rock bear. 3 fierce beasts, whose strength was comparable to Earthgang realm practitioners, were killed in this narrow secret room in less than 10 minutes. Looking at the fear in their eyes when they were dying, the two servants couldn't help but think of the teenager bathed in blood, and they trembled all over. When the teenager walked out of the door, the monstrous murderous spirit flowing all over his body had dissipated like the tide and disappeared. In the sunshine, the teenager was neither tall nor short, not fat nor thin, not good-looking or ugly, very ordinary and inconspicuous, just like a different person. He walked silently into a hall, where someone was already waiting. "Jianchen, you are here." The man in a green robe with his hair in a bun was young Sword King Shai Yutong. There was no doubt that this ordinary-looking teenager was Huang Jianchen. Huang Jianchen nodded and sat silently on one side, looking very dull. This was his character. When he was not fighting, he was a man of few words and few words. Shai Yutong obviously knew Huang Jianchen's character very well. He said casually, "Things have been arranged. 3 days later, at noon, Lin will fight with you in the arena." Huang Jianchen was silent for a moment and said, "Killing him is the most effective way to solve the problem." Shai Yutong shook his head. "No, this boy can't die. Miss Yen still needs his master's help to repair a musical instrument." His voice was flat, but it could not be refused. Huang Jianchen was silent for a long time, and finally nodded and said, "I will try my best." Shai Yutong frowned and seemed to be dissatisfied with the answer. He stared at Huang Jianchen for a long time, and then said, 3 days later, I will pick you up." Then he got up and left. "Wait." Huang Jianchen stopped him. Shai Yutong stopped and said, "What else?" Huang Jianchen said, "The fierce beasts you sent are not strong enough. Remember to send some powerful ones tomorrow." Shai Yutong raised his eyebrows and said, "As you wish." 3 days passed quickly. It was a sunny day. Early in the morning, Lin Sun woke up from meditation as usual. Washing, eating, practicing martial arts, everything was the same as usual. "Oh, I didn't expect you to be so calm," Shu Jin joked. Lin Sun cleaned up and said with a smile, It's just a fight. Do you need to be so worried? Shu Jin laughed. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up. You don't want to go? I heard it will be very lively this time. Lin asked. I don't want to watch the fight between the two little guys. It's not interesting at all. It's better to stay at home and drink and sleep. Shu Jin didn't care. Lin Sun replied with a smile and strode out. When he walked to the bustling streets of Mist City, there were discussions about this duel everywhere, and many figures were gathering in the direction of the arena. Even the spiritual screen in the center of the city was broadcasting the news of today's duel. Chapter 248. The arena was located in the east of Mist City, covering an area of 100 acres. It could accommodate tens of thousands of people to watch the fighting together. It was still 1:15, but the arena was already crowded with people. The noise went straight to the sky, and the atmosphere was very lively. They all came for the upcoming duel today. One was Lin Sun, who was qualified to participate in the province test, and the other was Huang Jianchen, a young man from the aristocratic family in the Forbidden City. The most important thing was that this duel was arranged by young Sword King Shai Yutong himself. These days, the news about this duel had already made a lot of noise in the whole Mist City. Everyone knew about it, so there was such a hot scene in the arena today. There were two kinds of seats in the arena. One was the ordinary seats, distributed around the arena, and the other was the box, which was specially set up for the nobles. At this time, in one of the boxes, when Mingxiu, Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu and other young men from the aristocratic families had already been sitting in it. Through the window in front of the box, they could have a panoramic view of the central ring of the arena. Have you heard that Miss Lu Qinyan is also here? I really don't know what Lin Sun is capable of. It's just a duel about him, but Miss Lu Qinyan is also attracted here. Yuan Shu murmured. Hey, when Lin Sun is defeated in front of tens of thousands of people, you won't envy him anymore. Qi Yunxiao smiled leisurely. Young Sword King is really influential. The duel arranged by him has attracted all the big shots in Mist City. I've asked around just now. Now in any box in the arena, there may be a big shot who can make Mist City tremble with a stomp of his foot. Someone sighed with emotion. Yes, I noticed it just now. I'm curious what these big shots will think when they see the scene of Lin Sun's fiasco. Haha, I don't know what those big shots will think. I only know that once Lin Sun is defeated this time, he is bound to lose his face and will never be able to raise his head again. Seeing them talking so excitedly about the scene after Lin Sun's fiasco, Wen Mingxiu couldn't help frowning and feeling a little disgusted. He didn't dare to fight back because he was forced by Lin Sun, but he hoped others would defeat Lin Sun and make a fool of him. What was the difference between this mentality and that of a clown? In another box, Lu Qinyan sat quietly in front of the window. From here, she could see everything outside, but the people in the box could not be seen from the outside. At this time, Lu Qinyan looked at the expectant faces in the arena and listened to their excited discussion about Lin Sun and Huang Jianchen. She felt a little depressed in her heart. Miss, just treat it as a show. Don't think too much about it. Granny Wind tried to persuade him. I just hope Lin Sun won't lose, otherwise I'll be guilty, Lu Qinyan whispered. Won't lose? Is that even possible? Granny Wind muttered in her heart. She didn't think that Lin Sun, a cunning boy, could be Huang Jianchen's opponent. Discussions like this took place in every corner of the wrestling ring. In those private rooms, the VIPs arrived one after another. Among them, there were not only the real power figures in the major forces, but also the famous great practitioners such as Wei Lingzhen, the president of Mist College, and Du Dongtu, the commander of Xiling Army. Even Mu Wansu, the new shopkeeper of Keystone Business, Yao Tuahai, who could keep pace with Governor Lu Wujuan, and Chu Feng, the director of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists, also came. Of course, young Sword King Shai Yutong and a group of young men from the Forbidden City would not miss this feast arranged by them. As time went on, There were more and more figures in the wrestling ring, and the atmosphere became more and more lively. As far as the eye could see, there were black heads everywhere. The people of Xiao Empire had a martial heart in their bones, and they had a natural fanaticism for fighting. There were too many things to look forward to in this upcoming battle. It was an unprecedented event for the whole Mist City. Therefore, although the battle had not yet begun, there was a fanatical atmosphere in the field. Dong! With an earth-shattering sound of war drums, the curtain of the duel was opened, and the atmosphere in the field reached an unprecedented height at this moment. Under the gaze of countless people, a bright light curtain of spiritual tattoos rose in the center of the wrestling ring. This was a spiritual tattoo formation, which defended the surroundings of the ring and prevented the aftermath of the battle from affecting the audience in the surrounding stands. Soon, Lin Sun's handsome figure appeared on the ring, which immediately attracted the attention of all the people present. This guy is Lin Sun? He looks like a teenager. I heard that he not only has the qualification to participate in the province test, but also has a powerful fighting capacity. He is one of the best among his peers. That's the guy. I don't know how he offended Huang Jianchen, a young man from an aristocratic family. It's not easy for Shi Yutong to issue a challenge in person. Hey, I think Lin Sun will suffer in this battle. Yes, no matter how powerful Lin Sun is, how can Huang Jianchen, a young man from an aristocratic family, compare with him? Most people were not optimistic about Lin Sun, especially Qi Yunxiao and Yuan Shu, who were excited to see Lin Sun fail miserably and make a fool of himself. This time, this guy is finished. In one of the boxes, a group of young men from aristocratic families laughed complacently. Lin Sun destroyed Huang Jianxiong's cultivation in front of them, which made them feel ashamed. Now, they could finally vent their anger with the help of Huang Jianchen. Only Shi Yutong was expressionless. He was not interested in this battle because he had already determined that Lin Sun could not be Huang Jianchen's opponent. For him, it was just a piece of cake to deal with Lin Sun. There was nothing to be happy about. Suddenly, there was an uproar in the field. What? This is Huang Jianchen? It's impossible. Why does a young man from an aristocratic family look so ordinary? He doesn't have the demeanor of a genius at all. It's so disappointing. I thought this person had 3 heads and 6 arms. Who would have thought that he was so ordinary? Is he really a powerful character? What do you know? You can't judge a book by its cover. What's wrong with ordinary appearance? For the young Sword King to personally arrange this duel, it has already proven how powerful he is. On the platform, Huang Jianchen, dressed in black, had already stood there. There was nothing eye-catching about him. He was ordinary. When it came to demeanor, he was even slightly inferior to Lin Sun. But when Huang Jianchen appeared, some sharp-eyed people suddenly felt awe. From Huang Jianchen's silent temperament, they saw something unusual. The less eye-catching a master was, the more terrible he was. It's really him. In the box, Lu Qingyan's eyes narrowed. This man can't be underestimated. He deserves to be a young man from an aristocratic family. Huang Jianchen is as silent as a mountain, but he has a strong inner strength. Whoever dares to underestimate him is destined to suffer a big loss. Yes, this battle may be worth watching. In the human gang realm, there are many top talents. Huang Jianchen is undoubtedly the most unique one among them. Perhaps it is because he seems too ordinary that he is impressive. In some other boxes, some big shots saw something. Although their comments were different, the meaning was surprisingly similar. They were extremely optimistic about Huang Jianchen. At this moment, Lin Sun was also looking at Huang Jianchen. To be honest, when he saw Huang Jianchen's ordinary appearance and temperament, even he couldn't help but be surprised. But immediately, Lin Sun's eyes couldn't help but narrow. He smelled an indescribable sense of danger from Huang Jianchen, as if there was a deadly power hidden under his ordinary appearance. Huang Jianchen raised his eyes and looked at Lin Sun. His eyes were flat and indifferent. His whole body was as calm as a pool of stagnant water, without any emotion. Just when the drums of the duel sounded, in an instant, Huang Jianchen, who was originally calm and emotionless, suddenly burst out a fierce light like electricity in his eyes. At practically the exact same time, strands of seemingly material bloody killing intent were released from his thin body. In a trance, the audience only felt that Huang Jianchen had become another person. His killing intent was overwhelming like a tide. He was like a killing god who had just walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The surroundings instantly became deathly silent. Everyone opened their eyes wide and revealed astounded expressions. Only now did they realize that this seemingly inconspicuous fellow's aura would actually become so terrifying when he was prepared for battle. That kind of bloody killing intent was obviously honed from countless bloody battles. It was hard to imagine how much blood Huang Jianchen's hands were stained with. Amazing! Who can imagine that this is the momentum that a teenager in the human gang realm can have? This time, Lin Sun can't escape. Many people exclaimed. Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu and others, as well as the children of the aristocratic families, were extremely excited at this time. Huang Jianchen's performance amazed them. But people like Chu Feng, Lu Qinyan and Mu Wansu's hearts sank. Huang Jianchen was so powerful that Lin Sun really met a tricky person this time. In contrast, Lin Sun was indeed a bit ordinary at the moment. After the battle drums sounded, he still looked as calm as before, but there were circles of energy fluctuations around him. No one knew that in Lin Sun's body, Windstorm Millstone had been running at full strength. The pure and majestic power of gang spirit was surging like a vast ocean, shining with an illusory and mysterious luster like sky green. Whoosh! Before the sound of the drum fell, Huang Jianchen, who had been standing still, suddenly had a whip of 15 meters in his hand. Without any nonsense, he attacked. Chapter 249. Whining, the 50-foot-long whip was like a black phantom, emitting whimpering sounds that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. It was a soul-stirring sound. The whip was called Nether Spirit. It was an ancient spiritual weapon inherited from the Huang clan. Although it was only a high-grade spiritual weapon of human rank, its power was mysterious and unpredictable, which couldn't be compared with the spiritual weapons on the market. Crack! The air burst, and the Nether Spirit whip rose in the air, which made Huang Jianchen's ferocious spirit more blazing. He looked like a killing god, which made all the audience gasp. As soon as Huang Jianchen attacked, the power he showed was so terrible that he didn't look like a teenager in human gang realm at all. Compared with him, most human gang realm practitioners in the world were dim. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and realized that his opponent was quite different this time. The fighting power he showed was even more frightening than that of some Earth Gang realm practitioners. Clang! Almost at the moment when Huang Jianchen attacked, Lin Sun didn't see any movement, but a slowing light saber, which was 2 feet and 7 inches long and 4 fingers wide, appeared in his hand. Whoosh! The saber light, like a flowing light, suddenly tore the darkness and reflected the world. What? In different places of the arena, there were some sounds of surprise at the same time. They seemed to see some mystery from Lin Sun's saber. But for most of the audience, Lin Sun's saber might be very powerful, but when it came to momentum, it seemed that it couldn't compare with Huang Jianchen's attack. Bang! In an instant, the Nether Spirit whip collided with the slowing light saber, producing a terrible roar. The strong wind swept around and shook the defensive spiritual formation around the arena. But Huang Jianchen didn't move as before. On the opposite side, Lin Sun stood with his saber, also unscathed. This strike was actually on par with each other. Not bad. Huang Jianchen's lips were curved, and there was a faint bloodthirsty luster in his eyes. Whining, he waved the Nether Spirit whip, and his figure was like a ghost. His momentum was like a ferocious beast looking down on the world to crush the enemy in front of him. In an instant, Lin Sun's figure was shrouded by thousands of whip shadows, as if he was about to be submerged. The arena was full of sharp whistling sounds made by the whip shadows, which made people's scalp numb. Huang Jianshan's momentum is like that of a tiger, and his ferocity is revealed. His fighting capacity is strong enough to rank at the peak of human gang realm. Many people were amazed by Huang Jianshan's performance. Lin Sun isn't bad either. He's trapped in a tight encirclement, but he can still advance and retreat freely without revealing any flaws. Some people also found that although Lin's figure was shrouded by the overwhelming whip shadows, he was not immediately suppressed. On the contrary, his whole body, like a rock, remained motionless despite the attacks from all directions. "Alright. I'm simply too excited that you're able to block my attack when we're at the same cultivation realm. Only an opponent like you is worthy of me going all out." On the arena, Huang Jianshan showed a bloodthirsty and crazy expression. He seemed to be very satisfied with Lin's performance. This made many people shudder. When he was not fighting, Huang Jianshan was as silent as a stone, ordinary and inconspicuous, but once he was in battle, he completely changed. His whole body was full of killing intent, and his expression was full of bloodthirsty madness. Even his words had increased, and they were filled with disdain and arrogance. This strong contrast made people unable to understand which appearance was the real Huang Jianshan. Should I be happy to be praised like this? A smile appeared on Lin Sun's face. I'm not that happy, but don't lose too quickly. Otherwise, I'll really be unhappy. Huang Jianshan looked up to the sky and laughed. His long hair was flying, and his eyebrows were full of madness. His figure flickered again, and his fighting momentum became more and more terrible. The overwhelming killing intent all gathered in the evil spirit whip in his hand, and he fought with Lin Sun. In an instant, the whip shadows on the arena were like a tide, layer upon layer, as if endless, and all of them were pressing towards Lin Sun. Every single strike contained the might to split open mountains and sweep through all obstacles, and it seemed to be terrifying to the extreme. Under such attacks, Lin Sun's movements were also not slow. The flowing light saber danced like lightning, drawing a simple, accurate and swift saber light, breaking the whip shadows one by one. Perhaps his momentum could not be compared with that of Huang Jianshan, but it seemed effortless. This made many practitioners in human gang realm shocked. If they were in the arena, they could not resist any of the attacks of Lin Sun and Huang Jianshan at all. It could be seen from this how unparalleled this battle was. It was definitely a peak duel in human gang realm. All of this ignited the atmosphere in the field, and made it more and more fiery. Many people had stood up and shouted, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" The shouts were like surging tides, shaking the arena. "Kill! Kill! Kill Lin Sun quickly, and let him be completely discredited and have no chance to raise his head again." In the box, Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu and other young men from wealthy families also shouted with excitement. The power shown by Huang Jianshan shocked them and gave them the hope of suppressing Lin Sun. Naturally, they were very happy and excited. If it were so easy, Lin Sun would not be Lin Sun. When Mingxiu sneered. At this moment, Huang Jianshan seemed fierce and unstoppable, but she also knew what terrible power was hidden under Lin Sun's warm and handsome appearance. Otherwise, it was impossible for Lin Sun to persist from the abnormal and cruel bloodthirsty camp to the end and walk out smoothly. Otherwise, in that rainy night a few days ago, the Xiuzhi sent by more than a dozen powerful forces would not have been utterly defeated and scared out of their wits. When Mingxiu had a vague feeling that Lin Sun had not used his real strength until now. He seemed to have been testing Huang Jianshan's strength and hidden cards. If this speculation was true, it proved that Huang Jianshan's attack at this time did not threaten Lin Sun. Could it be true? When Mingxiu was a little uncertain. Lin Sun was forced to defend, but he had no chance to fight back. He was doomed. It's a pity that after Huang Jianchen was disabled, he has been recovering from his injuries and can't come. If he can see this scene, he must be very happy, right? If possible, I really hope that Huang Jianchen can also disable Lin Sun's cultivation, so as not to leave any hidden dangers in the future. In another box, the young men from the aristocratic families in the Forbidden City were also excited and beaming with joy. Only Sha Yutong frowned slightly. His eyes were so sharp that no one else present could compare with him. At a glance, he could see that Huang Jianchen had not been able to suppress Lin Sun until now, which was something wrong. However, Sha Yutong was not worried about the possibility of Lin Sun's comeback. As far as he knew, Huang Jianchen had cultivated a mysterious martial art that had been passed down for a long time and had not shown it yet. "Grandma, what do you think of the battle? Does Child Lin have any hope of winning?" Lu Qingyan gazed at the battlefield, and there was a lingering worry in her heart. "Miss, you've asked this question many times," Granny Wen said helplessly. "At present, Huang Jianchen has a greater chance of winning, but I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to suppress Lin Sun in a short time." "Grandma, can't you see who will win in the end with your eyesight?" Lu Qingyan was obviously dissatisfied with Granny Wen's analysis. Granny Wen thought, "It's hard to say. These two little guys are both at the peak of the human gang realm. No one dares to judge the outcome until the end. The reason is actually very simple. They haven't used their real trump cards so far." Lu Qingyan frowned and felt inexplicably agitated. But she also knew that this was a battle full of variables, and no one could give a clear answer. "I haven't seen him for more than a year, but he has not only become the famous Master Sun in Mist City, but also his combat effectiveness has become so outstanding." Mu Wansu was in a daze, and her mood was complicated. Compared with Huang Jianchen, who was a complete stranger to her, she naturally hoped that Lin Sun would win. But at present, although Lin Sun's performance was good, he seemed to be inferior to Huang Jianchen. Similar discussions were taking place in every box at this time. For those big shots sitting in the box, they could naturally see all the mysteries in the battlefield at a glance. Some people were amazed by Huang Jianchen's fierce power, while others noticed Lin Sun's tenacity and calmness. But the conclusion was the same. Looking at the whole Mist City, it seemed that it was hard to find a few people who could keep pace with Lin Sun and Huang Jianchen in the human gang realm. Even looking at the whole empire, Lin Sun and Huang Jianchen could be called the peak of the human gang realm. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were young talent. After all, both of them were only in their teens. It was extremely rare to have such attainments on the road of cultivation at such a young age. Of course, those bigwigs who rejected and hated Lin Sun would not agree with him. On the contrary, they hoped that Huang Jianchen could defeat Lin Sun in one fell swoop this time, so that Lin Sun could never recover from this setback and be completely disabled. Yao Tuahai, a great practitioner, and more than a dozen powerful forces who had launched a killing campaign against Lin Sun on a rainy night all had this idea. Right when the various figures in the surroundings were discussing animatedly with various thoughts in their minds, a wave of clamorous noise that shook the heavens and the earth suddenly erupted, and it instantly converged the gazes of everyone onto the battlefield. Huang Jianchen was like a demon at this moment. His figure was floating in the air, and his whole body was surging with green flames. The flames were like ghost phosphorescence, mysterious and awe-inspiring. They reflected in the air, and dyed the area into a creepy green color. In a trance, people only felt that Huang Jianchen's momentum had changed again. He was like a king who controlled the ghosts of hell, which made people's hair stand on end. "I didn't expect you to be stronger than I had expected. However, the more you are like this, the happier I am. Do you know, it's really not easy to meet a decent opponent among those of the same generation? You should be proud of yourself for being able to achieve this." Huang Jianchen's tone was awe-inspiring, and his eyes were full of green flames, like a bloodthirsty ghost. But from now on, your failure is irreversible. Chapter 250. Huang Jianqin's change surprised the audience. They didn't expect that Huang Jianqin hadn't used his real trump card at this time. But soon after, many people became excited. This battle was too brilliant, and it was too much for their eyes to take in. It exceeded their imaginations. At this time, Huang Jianqin's momentum changed again. He was about to use his real trump card, which was undoubtedly like adding oil to the fire, making the audience completely boiling. Witnessing this scene, Wen Mingxiu, Mu Wansu, Lu Qinyan, Chu Feng and others were all nervous and couldn't help worrying about Lin Sun. On the contrary, Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu and others, as well as the children of the aristocratic families, were all excited and eager to rush to the field to cheer for Huang Jianqin. They had all seen that if Lin Sun didn't change, he was doomed to lose. In fact, at this moment, the audience had seen that Lin Sun had been in a passive defensive situation from the beginning of the battle. Now Huang Jianqin obviously didn't intend to give him another chance and was ready to use his trump card. In this case, Lin Sun would be in danger. But Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of all this. His momentum and breath were as ordinary as usual. Hearing Huang Jianqin's words, Lin Sun said with a little surprise, "Dude, are you out of your mind? Why are you so excited?" Huang Jianqin was stunned and thought Lin Sun was being sarcastic. He immediately said, "When you are defeated by me, I will ask you again what you mean by this sentence." As soon as he finished speaking, the wisps of green flames surging around his body suddenly lit up. They were like ghostly flames that danced wildly in the air. Crack! With a flick of his wrist, the Yin spirit whip in his hand flew into the air. All the green flames gathered in the whip's shadow and shook fiercely in the air. Whoosh! In an instant, the chilly wind whistled on the arena, the ghost fire raged, and the green phosphorus fire burned like an incarnation of a ghost domain. In a trance, people even had an illusion that the whip's shadow was driving a ferocious and terrible ghost to rush out of the ghost domain and bring disaster to the world. The originally seething arena was terrified when they saw such a terrifying and ghastly scene, and their entire bodies emanated coldness while the arena was perfectly silent. Ghosts walk at night. In the private room, many great figures seemed to have recognized something, and they were unable to maintain their calm as their expressions changed incessantly. "Granny Wind, what kind of skill is this?" Lu Qinyan was shocked. The Child Mother Ghost scripture is an ancient secret art that has been lost for many years. The requirements to practice it are extremely harsh and perverted. As far as I know, only the practitioners who have condensed rare ponds of dark spiritual power, such as Chains of Dark Prison and Sword of Dark Night, are qualified to practice such a unique art. Granny Wind's eyes were a little complicated. She didn't expect that Huang Jianqin's trump card was actually the Child Mother Ghost scripture. Lin Sun was in danger. Even if he didn't die in the end, he would be seriously injured, and might even be unable to recover from the setback. She didn't tell Lu Qinyan about this, for fear that she would be worried. It was just that Lu Qinyan had a pure heart and extraordinary wisdom. Just by looking at Granny Wind's expression, she knew that the so-called Child Mother Yin Ghost scripture was an extremely terrible secret method. "If something bad happens to Lin Sun, I will never forgive myself," Lu Qinyan murmured in a low voice. Granny Wind suddenly felt distressed. She regretted that she had gone too far. She just wanted to teach Lin Sun a lesson, but Shai Yutong put on such a fierce battle, which really made her unable to bear it. Sure enough, he refused to enter the Heiyao shrine because he already had the Child Mother Ghost scripture. Now Lin Sun is going to suffer. In another box, Shai Yutong was expressionless, but he was thoughtful. While the audience was shocked, the arena was already filled with gloom. The green ghost fire was burning and dancing, and Lin Sun's figure was about to be submerged. That scene was too strange and shocking, and many people felt a chill run down their spines. This was the Night of Ghosts, one of the killer moves of the Child Mother Ghost scripture. As soon as it was used, It was like hundreds of evil ghosts coming out of hell, with terrifying power. Lin Sun was going to die. This was what everyone thought. Even Huang Jianchen himself thought so. Since he mastered the child-mother ghost scripture, this was the first time he used it in public. He was confident that this move alone was enough to defeat Lin Sun in one fell swoop. With your defeat, I will make a name for myself in the world. You can be defeated without regret. Huang Jianchen's lips curved proudly. But at this moment, Lin Sun, who was about to be submerged by thousands of ghost fire and chilly wind, suddenly showed a playful smile. This made Huang Jianchen frown, but then his face changed slightly. He suddenly heard a strange roar. At first, it was inconspicuous, but in the blink of an eye, it was like a raging storm and thunder, sweeping the whole audience. Not good. Huang Jianchen's pupils shrank. He saw a storm vortex rushing out of Lin Sun's body, running between heaven and earth, rotating wildly, producing a monstrous power that almost devoured the world and disturbed yin and yang. What is this? What a terrible storm power! The whole audience was shocked and exclaimed. They just thought that Lin Sun would be defeated. Who would have thought that in a twinkling of an eye, Lin Sun had shown incredible power? Did he hide his real strength like Huang Jianchen before? Many big shots in the box couldn't sit still, and their faces changed slightly. They had misjudged Lin Sun just now. This was too unusual. From this, it could be seen how deeply Lin Sun had hidden his strength. It was undoubtedly tantamount to slapping everyone in the face invisibly if he didn't break out until now. Before people could react, the situation on the platform had changed dramatically. Under the storm, all the ghost fire and chilly wind were swallowed up and swept away as if they were vulnerable. That scene perfectly illustrated what it meant to be a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. Boom! Huang Jianchen had never thought that such a change would happen. He was caught unprepared and was directly hit by the storm power. The whole person was thrown up and smashed dozens of meters away. His blood was boiling, and he was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. His expression changed abruptly, and the wisps burning in his eyes burned even brighter. He had a look of disbelief on his face. His night parade of 100 ghosts was destroyed just like that? He couldn't accept this result. More importantly, he was confident that he had figured out the details of Lin Sun and could completely suppress him at this moment. But he never thought that Lin Sun would suddenly break out. Didn't this prove that Lin Sun had never used his real strength when he fought with him before? At this moment, the whole audience was in an uproar. They were completely shocked by this scene. Finally, they dared to confirm that Lin Sun did reserve his strength. Otherwise, how could he counterattack at this moment? In the box, Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu and others' excited expressions suddenly froze. Their eyes widened, and they couldn't understand why there was such a dull look. What a shrewd boy he is! Shai Yutong, who had never wavered, also darkened his face at this moment. Around him, the young men of aristocratic families had long been stunned by this scene, like a group of ducks being strangled by their neck. The fury of the storm reverses the universe. Chu Feng clapped his hands and laughed. All the tension, worry and uneasiness in his heart were swept away. Child Lin is really patient. He broke out at this moment. He must have done it on purpose. Lu Qinyan said in a reproachful tone, and a smile appeared on her fair and pretty face. Humph! I know this bastard is cunning. He didn't just do it on purpose. It's obvious that he didn't have any good intentions. He deliberately embarrassed those who looked down on him. Granny Wind snorted coldly. She felt a little strange in her heart. Lin Sun's attack just now was really terrifying. It was hard to imagine how he could have such strength in his thin body. More than a year has passed, and this guy is still as bad as ever. Mu Wansu spat with a smile and recalled some of her past contacts with Lin Sun. I knew it would be like this. When Mingxiu couldn't help but sigh with mixed feelings. Lin Sun was getting stronger and stronger, and even she had a feeling that he was beyond her reach. At that time, they were trainees who practiced in the same camp. At this time, on the arena, Lin Sun was surrounded by wisps of illusory green luster, which made his temperament more transcendent. Combined with Lin Sun's inconspicuous appearance before, Lin Sun's image in everyone's mind was filled with a touch of mystery. On the other hand, Huang Jianchen was ferocious from the beginning. When he displayed Ghost's Night, his power had reached the extreme, which was shocking. However, he was defeated by Lin Sun at this moment. Compared with him, Lin Sun was more and more unusual. He had a kind of unfathomable demeanor, as immovable as a mountain. The exclamations in the field, and the strange eyes of the people, were like knives for Huang Jianchen at this moment, making his heart bleed. He couldn't accept all this. He had been low-key for too long. He wanted to use this battle to show off his power completely. How could he stand such a sudden change? I admit that I underestimated you before, but I won't give you a second chance. Huang Jianchen climbed up from the ground with a cold look. His words seemed to be squeezed out of his teeth, and he was cold and cruel. You have been saying this since the beginning of the battle. I advise you not to do it again. Otherwise, once you lose, you will be slapping yourself in the face, which will be very embarrassing. Lin Sun said with a serious and sincere face. Many spectators couldn't help but be stunned when they saw this. But when they thought about it carefully, as Lin Sun said, Huang Jianchen was arrogant and looked down on Lin Sun as if he was nothing. Now, it seemed a little weird to say such words again. Of course, if Lin Sun said this at other times, it would be fine. But at this time, it obviously gave people a sense of ridicule. However, Lin Sun said it so sincerely, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. In the box, Lu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh out loud. For the first time, she found that Lin Sun was not nervous at all at this time. Instead, he was still so eloquent and good at making fun of people. When Granny Win saw this, she couldn't help but feel nervous. Since her young miss met Lin Sun, she had become a little different from before. If her Granny Wind immediately shook her head and stopped thinking about it. If something really happened, Lin Sun had to go through her first. On the arena, when Huang Jianchen heard Lin Sun's words and looked at Lin Sun's serious and sincere expression, a strong impulse rose in his heart. He wanted to smash Lin Sun's face with his fist. It was so hateful. Huang Jianchen gnashed his teeth with hatred, and his face became ugly. Did this guy really think that he couldn't do anything to him? Chapter 251. Huang Jianchen, who was extremely angry, let out a long and ferocious roar from his lips. His voice was like the scream of a ghost in hell, shaking the field and deafening the ears. The audience in the field was horrified. They realized that Huang Jianchen had fallen into a state of rage at this moment and wanted to fight desperately with all his strength. Sure enough, Huang Jianchen's whole body was burning with a green flame, like the phosphorescence of hell, releasing a frightening power. Clatter, the evil spirit whip in his hand swept up, leaving a circle of frightening green halo in the air. In an instant, hundreds of ghost phantoms emerged on the arena, each of them baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Their ghostly aura soared to the sky, shocking the world. The audience was shocked. This scene was more than twice as powerful as the Night of Ghosts just now. Was this Huang Jianchen's real killing move? Chu Feng, Lu Qingyan, Mu Wansu and others, who were still rejoicing for Lin Sun, all changed their faces at this moment. The change was so fast that they were all caught off guard. Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu and others, as well as those young men from the Forbidden City, were excited again at this moment. Sure enough, how could Huang Jianchen be defeated so easily? This was the battle of the peak. There would be too many unexpected things and variables, but it was precisely because of this that this duel seemed to be full of twists and turns, thrilling and wonderful. At this time, on the arena, Huang Jianchen's momentum was monstrous. He was like the king of the ghost domain. His lips uttered a cold and chilling voice. With the spirit as the guide, thousands of ghosts turn into hell. Every word was like thunder, shaking the soul. In the end, Huang Jianshan's face suddenly turned pale, and he coughed up a mouthful of scarlet blood. Clearly, the power of this attack was too strong, and even he was somewhat unable to withstand it when he used it. Boom! On the arena, thousands of ghost phantoms danced wildly, and the green flame was steaming. In a trance, it seemed that there was really an entrance to the hell of ghosts, dragging Lin Sun in and suppressing him forever. This was too terrifying. Who could believe that a young man in the human gang realm could display such a shocking unique skill? Not to mention the spectators in the field, even some Earth Gang realm practitioners felt cold and frightened when they saw this scene. Looking at Lin Sun, he was besieged by thousands of phantoms of evil ghosts, and his whole body was shrouded in green flames. His figure was almost invisible. This caused everyone to be astounded. The atmosphere was deathly silent, and it wasn't as bustling and clamorous as before. However, this deathly silent atmosphere was undoubtedly even more shocking. Everyone could see that victory and defeat might be decided at this moment. They opened their eyes wide for fear of missing the slightest detail. Many people could not help but clench their fists. Even the big shots in the private rooms pursed their lips and remained silent. Their attention was focused on the arena at that moment. Huang Jianshan enjoyed this feeling very much. The mood and atmosphere of the audience all changed because of him. The feeling of being the focus of attention swept away the anger and humiliation he had accumulated in his heart. This time, Lin Sun, what else could you use to fight against me? Today, you are destined to become my stepping stone, a sacrifice for my rise to fame, and you will forever live in my shadow. Huang Jianshan's eyes were full of excitement. Suddenly, there was an exclamation from the audience, which made Huang Jianshan frown and unhappy. Damn it, which bastard was destroying the wonderful atmosphere at this moment? But before Huang Jianshan could find the source of the exclamation, there was a continuous uproar in the field, full of shock, astonishment, and disbelief. Immediately, this uproar became more and more, completely disrupting the originally deathly silent atmosphere. Huang Jianshan came to his senses and woke up from his thoughts just now. When he looked up at the field again, his face suddenly changed. The situation that he thought he would win for sure had changed once again while he was in a daze. There was a wisp of a pitch-black ferocious light flowing amidst the myriad of evil spirit phantoms, and it was like a star that had fallen from outer space. Every single strike easily crushed an evil spirit phantom. In the face of such an attack, the dense green flames and the evil ghost phantoms were simply as fragile as pieces of paper. It was Lin Sun who sent out that star-like ominous light. At this moment, his figure was like a sharp edge rushing to all directions. The flowing lightsaber in his hand made a sound like a cheer. Every time he waved it, it was accompanied by terrible and turbulent ominous light. The brilliance of the light couldn't be described in words. The exclamation and uproar in the field just now were caused by this scene. Indeed, no one expected that under Huang Jianshan's desperate all-out suppression, Lin Sun could still be so strong and unstoppable. The whole audience was completely boiling. Lin Sun once again proved his strength with his powerful strength. His invincible demeanor even caused many women in the field to scream excitedly. Lin Sun, who was once looked down upon, now launched a gorgeous counterattack. The shock caused by this strong contrast could be imagined. In the box, many big shots were also moved. They were all speculating what kind of saber skill Lin Sun had used. But according to their experience and eyesight, it was difficult to see any clues. This made them more and more surprised. Boom! In just a few breaths, the purgatory scene on the arena was swept away, leaving only Lin Sun standing with his saber and Huang Jianshan, who had long been stunned. At this time, Qi Yunxiao, Yuan Shu, and other people, as well as the children of aristocratic families, were also stunned. Lin Sun defeated Huang Jianshan's unique skills twice in a row, which was like hitting them hard on the head twice in a row, which made them suffer a double blow and completely confused. Even so, they couldn't defeat Lin Sun? Why is it like this? On the arena, Huang Jianchen still couldn't accept all this. His face was pale, his eyes were dilated, and he looked like he had lost his soul. Is it my turn to attack? In this regard, Lin Sun still seemed very calm. As he spoke, he walked forward with his saber. Every step he took made many people in the audience frightened. Just now, Huang Jianchen had been taking the initiative to attack, which made people ignore one thing. From beginning to end, Lin Sun had never really taken the initiative to attack. Didn't this mean that he was not passive defense at all, nor was he unable to fight back? Instead, he had been waiting for Huang Jianchen to do his best? If so, it would be terrible. At least it proved that, from the beginning of the battle, all the attacks of Huang Jianchen did not bring any threat to Lin Sun. Obviously, Huang Jianchen also realized this. He couldn't help but change his face. He looked at Lin Sun with doubts, unwillingness, anger, and confusion in his eyes. What kind of opponent was Lin Sun who had endured until this moment to take the initiative to attack? Clang! Lin Sun didn't pay attention to these. The flowing light saber in his hand suddenly made a clear sound and slashed out. But before this saber fell, Huang Jianchen on the opposite side suddenly screamed, "No, I give up!" At this moment, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. Did this guy just give up? Wasn't he too weak to fight? Hearing that Huang Jianchen took the initiative to admit defeat, the audience was in a complete uproar. They had expected that Huang Jianchen might not be able to turn the situation around, but they never expected that he would take the initiative to admit defeat. Under the watchful eyes of the public, it was so surprising that he, a genius from an aristocratic family in the Forbidden City, did such a disgraceful thing. The outcome has been decided. Granny Wind let out a sigh with a strange look in her eyes. She could see that there was a completely different power in Lin Sun's saber technique. That power seemed to be faintly discernible, but it was actually terrifying. But Granny Wind couldn't see through it. What was the origin of this power? She couldn't help but be surprised. She felt that she had underestimated Lin Sun in the past. Lu Qinyan patted her chest and breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking of her nervous appearance just now, she couldn't help but feel ashamed. Chu Feng was already ecstatic. He cheered loudly in the box as if he didn't do this to vent his excitement. When Mingxiu glanced at the people around her, and saw that Qi Yunxiao and the others were like being struck by lightning at the moment. They were like clay statues, and she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Who could they blame? How could Lin Sun be as simple as you thought? Sha Yutong frowned with a gloomy expression on his face. Huang Jianchen's initiative to admit defeat made him angry. In his opinion, Huang Jianchen could be defeated, but he couldn't be defeated in such a way. At the same time, he was also surprised by Lin Sun's strength. It was hard to imagine that a country boy who had been saved by him once had such achievements now. But in general, no matter what the result of this duel was, it could not affect Sha Yutong's state of mind. For him, when Lin Sun had enough strength to challenge him, perhaps he would really pay attention to this young man. Before that, he would not change his opinion about Lin Sun. As for the young men of aristocratic families around Sha Yutong, they all looked as if they had lost their parents at the moment. They were unwilling to give up, but the result had been decided and they could do nothing about it. The arena was completely boiling. Everyone's emotions were released at this moment. Many people were shouting for Lin Sun's victory, which was the glory that the winner deserved. As for Huang Jianchen, no matter how good his family background was, no matter how amazing his performance was just now, he had been reduced to a loser at this moment. All he could get was a sigh of regret and pity. Lin Sun was not carried away by the victory. He looked at Huang Jianchen, who had returned to his ordinary appearance and left the arena silently as if nothing had happened. Suddenly, an inexplicable killing intent surged in his heart. Lin Sun knew that it undoubtedly took a kind of unimaginable courage to take the initiative to admit defeat under such circumstances. For most of the strong who put dignity first, they would rather be killed than make such a humiliating decision. However, Huang Jianchen immediately admitted defeat when he saw the situation was not right. From beginning to end, there was no hesitation. Once such a person became an enemy, he was undoubtedly the most terrible. Chapter 252. Finally, Lin Sun sighed in his heart and suppressed the killing intent in his heart. After all, this was a duel of life and death, not a real bloody battle. What's more, on such an occasion, there was no chance to kill Huang Jianchen. After the battle, Lin Sun left the arena directly. Walking out of the arena and walking on the bustling streets of Mist City, he suddenly thought of Shai Yutong. The duel arranged by Shai Yutong had come to an end. He probably didn't expect this result, right? What would his expression be when he saw Huang Jianchen take the initiative to admit defeat? But immediately Lin Sun shook his head. No matter what Shai Yutong thought, the battle was over. From the moment Huang Jianchen admitted defeat, the grievances between him and Huang Jianxiong also came to an end. This was already determined before the battle. However, Lin Sun was also very sure that it was obviously impossible to stop those aristocratic families from provoking him with a battle. Whoever believed it would be an idiot. But at least in this Mist City, Shai Yutong would certainly not trouble him again. Otherwise, they would not be able to pass Granny Wind alone. For Lin Sun, this was enough. When he returned home, Shu Jin was drinking. When he saw Lin Sun, he asked casually, "Is it over?" Lin Sun nodded. There was no need to ask the result at all. Shu Jin knew that Lin Sun must have won. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to be so calm. Shu Jin grinned. "Since the trouble has been solved for the time being, how about having a drink with me?" Lin Sun sat opposite to Shu Jin and also smiled. "It's my pleasure." The night wind was blowing, and the starry sky was shining overhead. The small courtyard seemed particularly quiet. The two drank and chatted. They didn't discuss the duel in the arena. They seemed to be very comfortable. Qiuqiu was lying on the side, watching the two of them drink bowl after bowl of wine, looking pitiful and salivating. But Lin Sun would not be soft-hearted. He directly ignored the pitiful look of Chirps. He would never let Chirps become addicted to alcohol. Not long after, the quiet atmosphere of the courtyard was interrupted by a knock on the door. Chu Feng rushed in like a whirlwind with an excited face and shouted, "Great! It felt so good. In today's battle, you are like the reincarnation of the god of war. Your power is boundless." As he spoke, he picked up the bowl and drained it in one gulp. But to Chu Feng's surprise, both Shu Jin and Lin Sun looked indifferent. They didn't look happy after winning at all. "Why are you guys so calm?" Chu Feng couldn't understand what was happening. "Is there a need to make such a fuss over such a trivial matter? Come, let's drink." Shu Jin picked up his bowl and clinked it with Lin's. Lin Sun also looked at Chu Feng strangely and said, "Is it really worth being so happy?" Chu Feng suddenly felt somewhat stifled. He couldn't help but say, "Isn't this something to be happy about? Brother, this duel has attracted the attention of the whole Mist City. You don't even know how many big shots came to the arena. The moment you win, I can guarantee that they will definitely be dumbstruck." The more he talked, the more excited Chu Feng became. He continued, "The moment where you are the center of attention and fame belongs to you alone, brother. I can even pat my chest and guarantee that from tonight on, the whole Mist City will be shocked by this duel, and your name will become the focus of countless practitioners. Think about it, what a great honor it is. Hey, are you listening to me? I say, can you guys give me some reaction?" Seeing that Lin Sun and Shu Jin were still indifferent to what he had said, Chu Feng felt frustrated. He even began to doubt whether he was too excited or they didn't take it seriously. In fact, it was not that Lin Sun was too calm, but that his biggest taboo was fame. As the saying goes, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. He didn't want to be stared at by many people. For Lin Sun, the so-called glory and fame were trouble. He would try to avoid it if he could. Otherwise, he would not have used the name of Master Sun to cover up his real identity. For Shu Jin, this kind of duel between young people in human gang realm was no different from a small game. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed here all the time instead of going to the arena to watch. As the saying goes, different pursuits naturally lead to different reactions to the same thing. However, no matter how taboo Lin Sun was, no matter how indifferent Shu Jin was, the impact of this duel could not be covered up and erased at all. Just as Chu Feng had predicted, news of the Battle of the Apex that had taken place in the arena swept through the entire arena like a storm, causing an uproar in the streets and alleys of the night. Lin Sun's name, like a rising star, dotted the night sky of Mist City and became a well-known young overmatch. Many people sighed with emotion that there was another dazzling genius in Southwest Province, and his rise was unstoppable. Some people envied and said that Lin Sun might be famous after this duel, but he was destined to encounter a lot of suppression and trouble in the future because he had offended the children of aristocratic families. Even some practitioners who were about to take part in this year's province test felt great pressure and worry when they learned that Lin Sun had also signed up for it. Even the children of aristocratic families from the Forbidden City were defeated by this guy. Who could be his opponent in the province test? In a word, there were all kinds of comments, but the impact was far from over, because this duel was too visually impactful, and both sides were the top figures of the younger generation in their teens, which could be called a rare peak duel. So it didn't take long for the news of this duel to spread out of Mist City and spread to other parts of the Empire. Even the spiritual screens all over the Empire began to spread the news of this duel, and some strong practitioners with rich combat experience were invited to make a long and detailed analysis of this duel. Finally, they unanimously praised this as a classic battle at the peak of Human Gang Realm, which could be used as a textbook for Human Gang Realm practitioners to figure out and learn. The spiritual screens faced the entire 34 provinces of the Empire. When this news spread, it immediately caused a lot of sensation in other parts of the Empire. Although it was not as amazing as that in Mist City, Lin Sun's name spread more widely in the Empire. In the western border of the Empire, the camp of the Blood Army. In a rugged tent there was a sudden burst of laughter. Damn it, Lin Sun is too insidious. He held back until the last moment to make a big move. He deserves to be my brother. Ning Meng sat carelessly in an animal skin chair. There was a spirit developing plate opposite him, which reflected a light curtain. The scene of Lin defeating Huang Jianchen was reflected on the light curtain. At this time, Ning Meng looked excited and kept drinking, as if he was happier than Lin Sun. Not long after, a guard hurried to report, "Young master, I found out that child Lin destroyed the cultivation of Huang Jianchen's younger brother, which led to this duel." Ning Meng narrowed his eyes and sneered. "I see. When did my brother become so high profile? It turns out that he was bullied." The guard reminded, "Young master, it was child Lin who destroyed the cultivation of Huang Jianchen's younger brother, not bullied." Ning Meng rolled his eyes and scolded, "Don't talk nonsense. I know what the sons of the aristocratic families are like. If they didn't provoke my brother first, how could such a thing happen?" Speaking of this, he suddenly sneered again. "What's more, even if my brother bullies others, what's wrong with that?" The guard immediately smiled bitterly. Only the young master in front of him dared to say such unreasonable words in such an imposing manner. "Wait and see. When I return to the Forbidden City next year, I will block the gate of Huang clan first. If I don't beat Huang Jianchen, my surname will not be Ning." Ning Meng said murderously. The guard had a headache again. Since he came back from the bloodthirsty camp, Ning Meng had become more and more lawless. He really didn't know how much trouble he would cause when he returned to the Forbidden City next year. In the headquarters of Keystone Business in the Forbidden City, more than a dozen young girls surrounded Shiryu, massaging his shoulders, feet, head, serving tea, pouring water. They served him meticulously. Only the children of the fortune god Shur of the Empire could enjoy such a luxurious life. At this time, Shiryu rested comfortably on a bed and murmured, "Huang Jianchen is nothing. He is just a son of an inferior aristocratic family. He can't make any waves. Shai Yutong, who arranged this duel, is a little tricky. If Lin Sun offends him, it will be troublesome. Young master, who is Lin Sun?" A young girl opened her big watery eyes and asked curiously. "An interesting guy." With a smile on his lips, Shiryu said leisurely, "When he comes to the Forbidden City in the future, you have to entertain him well." "Well, let me think about it. This guy seems to be a virgin. That won't do. Can a man who doesn't understand women be a man?" A group of young girls next to him couldn't help giggling, with different beauties and amorous feelings. At this time, Shiryu suddenly became serious and said, "I remember that in a few days, Keystone Business in Mist City will hold its centennial celebration, right?" Immediately, a young girl said quickly, "Yes, it will be more than a month later." Shiryu thought and said, "Go and arrange it. Tell the shopkeeper of Keystone Business in Mist City to invite Lin Sun to attend the celebration. Well, arrange him according to the treatment of the chief VIP. Don't neglect him." A group of young girls was stunned and realized that Child Lin might have an unusual relationship with their young master. Chapter 253. Woo Woo Woo. Spiritual tattoo shuttle, like a long dragon, flew in the air of Mist City, making a whistling whistle. It was early in the morning, and there were many pedestrians going out, which filled the carriage. Lin Sun could only stand in it and listen to the discussions around him. It had been more than 10 days since the battle in the arena. During these days, this peak duel was spread everywhere in Mist City. Until now, this heat had not subsided at all. But for Lin Sun, this period was very peaceful. Everything was back on track. Every day, in addition to practicing, he went to the commune of spiritual tattooists to accept tasks to make money. Occasionally, when he was free, he would drink with Shu Jin. Obviously, Lin Sun's earlier speculation had come true. After that duel, at least in Mist City, those aristocratic families dared not to target him blatantly. This undoubtedly made Lin Sun much more relaxed. He only needed to concentrate on practicing and wait for the province test to begin. There would be no more trouble. "May, what is Lin Sun? Can he give you pocket money? Can he go shopping with you like I do? Can he like you as attentively as I do?" "Humph, you are too tacky. Lin Sun is my role model. Do you know that now my friends around me have begun to worship Lin Sun? I can't fall behind." "May, you can't eat role models. Have you seen Lin Sun? Do you know what he looks like? What if he is a liar?" "That's enough. I won't pay attention to you if you say that again." Suddenly, Lin Sun noticed that a young boy and a girl beside him seemed to be arguing, and they even mentioned his name in their words. He couldn't help but chuckle because of this. When did I become an idol that others hold in high esteem? Unexpectedly, his behavior was seen by the girl. She immediately glared at Lin Sun. "What are you laughing at? What's so funny? I just like to worship Lin Sun. Can't I?" Lin Sun's expression froze, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fortunately, the commune of spiritual tattooists arrived at this time. Lin Sun turned around and walked out of the carriage. Before leaving, he could still hear the girl murmuring angrily, "He doesn't even dare to answer my question. He has no backbone at all. This kind of man is not even 1/10,000th of Lin Sun." Lin Sun didn't know whether he should be happy or angry. He always felt strange in his heart. Perhaps this was the feeling of being famous? While thinking, Lin walked into the commune of spiritual tattooists. Along the way, no one recognized this dazzling figure who was now famous in Mist City, and no one would associate him, a teenager who only traveled by spiritual shuttle every day, with the brilliant Lin Sun. After all, Mist City was so big that only a small number of people could see what Lin Sun looked like. Spiritual tattoo shuttles were the most common means of transportation, and most of the people who took them were ordinary people. Practitioners in the city would rather take chariots or ride spirit beasts than be associated with ordinary people. Under such circumstances, the chance of recognizing Lin Sun became slim. However, this was even better. If he could be recognized wherever he went, that feeling would undoubtedly be very painful. Entering the adytum on the second floor of the commune of spiritual tattooists, Lin Sun was about to receive a task as usual when he saw Chu Feng coming over with enthusiasm and saying mysteriously, "Bro, in a month, Keystone Business in Mist City will hold its centennial celebration. At that time, Miss Lu Qinyan will attend in person and play a wonderful piece of music. Don't you have any idea?" Lin Sun was stunned. "What does it have to do with me?" Chu Feng almost rolled his eyes and said, "Bro, do you know how difficult it is to get an invitation letter from Keystone Business now? You can't buy it in the black market, not to mention how high the price is. You can imagine how lively Keystone Business will be at that time. It will definitely be full of distinguished friends and distinguished guests." Lin Sun said angrily, "We haven't received an invitation letter. Why do we care about this? What's more, I'm not interested in this kind of occasion." Chu Feng was still unwilling to give up and said, "Bro, you are now a friend of Miss Lu Qinyan. With your help to repair her ancient rhythm ocarina, don't you worry about not getting an invitation letter?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows, stared at Chu Feng for a moment and said, "Bro, it's you who want to go. If so, I can help you fight for it." Chu Feng was overjoyed at once. He had been waiting for this sentence. Taking a deep breath, he suppressed his excitement and said, "Thank you, bro," Lin Sun said, "but I can't guarantee whether I can get an invitation letter. Bro, don't be happy too early." Chu Feng said with a smile, "I think it will work. If I don't even give you face, who will help to repair the ancient rhythm ocarina?" Lin Sun smiled bitterly. This guy was determined to win. "Are you really not going to see the fun? Miss Lu Qingyan's performance is a great event. Once you miss it, it will be a pity." Chu Feng couldn't help asking. "No, I won't go." Lin Sun shook his head. In another month, it would be time for him to break through the third level of Green Cloud Path in the Heaven Accessing Place. He had no mood to do other things. Chu Feng didn't insist anymore and soon left. Lin Sun also calmed down and began to accept refining tasks. Different from the past, he no longer rigidly chose spiritual weapons of middle-grade human rank to refine. Instead, he chose some refining tasks that he had never tried before according to his own interests. For example, he refined some strange weapons such as Thunder Fireball, Water Dividing Thorn, and Nine Bend Whip, or equipment such as Heart Protection Mirror, cloak, boots, and armor. There were even some custom-made spiritual hose, formation plates, beast-taming seals, and spiritual tattoo puppets, which were needed by different professions such as spiritual plant master, beast tamer, and puppet master. By doing so, Lin Sun wanted to further hone his mastery of spiritual tattoos. A truly powerful spiritual tattooist must master the cultivation of all kinds of spiritual weapons. Only in this way could he comprehend spiritual tattoos by analogy and have a deeper understanding of spiritual tattoos. Most importantly, by doing so, it would also be of great help to refine real spiritual tattoo armors in the future. Spiritual tattoo armors were a kind of treasure that could make all the strong practitioners of Tao Insight Realm in the Empire fight for it. And if he could refine spiritual tattoo armors, Lin Sun didn't need to worry about making money at all. Just by sitting there, people would take the initiative to send money to him. Of course, the reason why such a treasure was called a treasure was naturally that it couldn't be so easy to refine. At least at present, Lin Sun still had a long way to go before he could refine such a treasure. What he was doing now was to shorten the distance as soon as possible. However, spiritual tattoos couldn't be done in a hurry. It had to be honed and learned over a long period of time. Without extraordinary talent and understanding, it was even difficult to make progress on this road. The reason why spiritual tattooists had such a high status in the empire was that there were too few practitioners who could become spiritual tattooists, and those who could refine spiritual tattoo armors were even fewer. After receiving 2 tasks and completing them, Lin Sun got up and was ready to leave. Unexpectedly, Chu Feng came again at this time with an indescribably strange look. "What's wrong?" Lin Sun couldn't help asking. "Keystone Business sent an invitation letter, saying that it was specially for you." Chu Feng looked a little absent-minded, puzzled and worried. Lin Sun was keenly aware that Chu Feng's tone was a little different. He couldn't help frowning. "Is it for Master Sun or me?" Chu Feng stared at Lin Sun and said, "It's you." Then he hurriedly explained, "Bro, I have never revealed your identity. Could it be that Miss Lu Qinyan helped you get the invitation letter?" Lin Sun shook his head. "I haven't visited her these days. How could there be such a good thing? By the way, what else did the person who sent the invitation letter say?" Chu Feng patted his forehead and cried, "Yes, the attendant specially told me that the invitation letter was specially sent to you by their shopkeeper." Lin Sun was stunned. "Who's their shopkeeper? I don't seem to know him." Chu Feng also felt very strange and said, "Almost a month ago, Keystone Business in Mist City changed a new shopkeeper. It seems that she is a woman named Mu Wansu. It is said that she was dispatched from Donglin Town." Before Chu Feng finished, Lin Sun suddenly laughed. "It's her. That's right. Only she knows who Master Sun is." Chu Feng was stunned. "Do you know him?" Lin Sun nodded and didn't explain much. He said, "Don't worry, bro. Since he did this, he will not reveal my identity." Chu Feng breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good." In fact, he was still a little surprised. Through these days of contact, Lin Sun brought him too many shocks. He never thought that Lin Sun even knew the shopkeeper of Keystone Business whom he trusted, which made him more and more confused about Lin Sun. How many secrets did Lin Sun have that he didn't know? Lin Sun patted Chu Feng on the shoulder. "Bro, it's good now. You don't need to go to Lu Qinyan to get an invitation letter. Just take it." Chu Feng hurriedly said, "This is for you." "How can I take it?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "You can go in my name. Don't worry, she won't think too much about it." As he said, he turned around and left. Chu Feng stood still for a moment and finally couldn't refuse. At the same time, in an antique hall of Keystone Business, Mu Wansu sat in the main seat and asked casually, "Has it been done?" The attendant next to her hurriedly said, "The invitation letter has been sent to Child Lin of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists, according to your order." Mu Wansu nodded, but she was in a trance. She received a message from the headquarters of Keystone Business in the Forbidden City a few days ago, saying that the third child you invited Lin Sun to participate in this grand meeting and asked to prepare a chief VIP seat for Lin Sun, which made Mu Wansu secretly surprised. If the eldest child Xuan did this, she might be able to understand. After all, Xuan once appreciated Lin Sun. But this time it was not the eldest child Xuan, but the third child Yu. As far as she knew, the third child Yu was a playboy who only loved beauties but not the country. Although he was the brother of the eldest child Xuan, the relationship between them was not very good. But now, he also attached so much importance to Lin Sun, which made Mu Wansu feel a little incredible. When did Lin Sun, the little bastard, have a relationship with the third child Yu? Chapter 254. While Mu Wansu was in a trance, the attendant next to her also seemed to have something on his mind. After a little hesitation, he gritted his teeth and said, "Shopkeeper, with Child Lin's current status, it seems that he is far from qualified to be the chief VIP, right?" Mu Wansu said casually, "Why not?" The attendant took a deep breath and said, "Child Lin is now famous in Mist City, but he is still a human gang realm practitioner, and his identity is not obvious. It seems that he is not a descendant of a rich family. The chief VIP seats are reserved for the most important VIPs in the city, such as Governor Lu Wujuan, President of Mist College Wei Lingzhen, and Xiling Army Du Dongtu. After a pause he continued, if Child Lin sits side by side with these big shots, it will violate the taboo and cause many people's dissatisfaction. Mu Wansu said indifferently, have you finished? The attendant was stunned. Shopkeeper, what do you mean? Mu Wansu said coldly, you're right, but you're wrong about one thing. Lin Sun is different from others. Remember, he must be the chief VIP. If anyone dares to neglect him, pack up and get out of here. The attendant trembled all over, and his forehead was covered with cold sweat. He finally realized that the shopkeeper was serious about arranging Lin Sun as the chief VIP this time. But what was different about Lin Sun? The attendant never understood. In fact, Mu Wansu also didn't understand why Shiryu, the third child, gave such an order in person. Was Lin Sun so important now? Mu Wansu couldn't help but feel jealous of Lin Sun. She hadn't seen him for more than a year, but this little rascal was getting better and better. After leaving the commune of spiritual tattooists, Lin Sun walked along the street into Treasure Pill's store. Treasure Pill's store was the top elixir store in Mist City, selling a dazzling array of elixirs of first-class quality, which could meet the needs of most practitioners. Of course, the elixirs were also extremely expensive, which ordinary practitioners couldn't afford. The most important thing was that there were powerful pharmacists in Treasure Pill's store. Many unique elixirs were peddled in it, which couldn't be bought in the commune of spiritual tattooists. What Lin Sun needed was a kind of elixir called Cloud Gang Purple Spirit Pill, which could only be bought in Precious Pill's store. Up to now, Lin Sun's cultivation had a faint sign of reaching the mastery of Human Gang realm. Especially after many battles during this period, his cultivation had obviously improved a lot. If he continued to practice in this way, he could at least reach the mastery of Human Gang realm before the province test began. But Lin Sun couldn't wait any longer. In another month, he would enter the heaven accessing place to pass the third test of Green Cloud Path. There were only 3 chances this time, so Lin Sun didn't dare to be negligent. In order to be more prepared, improving his cultivation had undoubtedly become a top priority. In order to improve his cultivation, the supply of elixirs was indispensable. In the past, Lin Sun had been taking the Green Gang spirit-enhancing elixir. This kind of elixir was good in terms of quality, but it was inferior to the Cloud Gang Purple Spirit elixir. This could be seen from the price. A bottle of 60 Azure Gang spirit-enhancing elixirs was worth 50 gold coins, while a bottle of 30 Cloud Gang Purple Spirit pills cost 100 gold coins. 100 gold coins were worth 10,000 silver coins, but it could only buy 30 Cloud Gang Purple Spirit pills. Such a high price was indeed beyond the reach of ordinary practitioners. In the past, Lin Sun was certainly reluctant to buy such elixirs. But because he promised to help Lu Qinyan repair the ancient rhythm ocarina, Lin Sun received a total of 10,000 gold coins as a reward. Therefore, it was not a big expense for him to buy the Cloud Gang Purple Spirit Pill. When Lin Sun came out of Treasure Pill's store, he had lost 1,000 gold coins and gained 10 bottles of Cloud Gang Purple Spirit Pills. This speed of spending money was enough to make many practitioners dumbfounded. But Lin Sun didn't think so. In his opinion, the purpose of making money was to cultivate better. If he didn't spend money, it would be a waste of resources. With these elixirs, I should be able to reach the mastery of Human Gang realm before I pass the test, Lin Sun thought as he walked. Not long after, Lin Sun was suddenly attracted by a quarrel. He looked up and saw that on the side of the street, more than a dozen strong ruffians surrounded a shop and were cursing loudly. It seemed that they were looking for trouble with that shop. This kind of thing was very common in Mist City, so it was not surprising. Where there were interests, there were disputes, and where there were disputes, there were bound to be some desperados who licked blood at the tip of a knife. But when Lin Sun saw the name of the shop, he couldn't help being stunned. Golden Hall? In an instant, he remembered that when he was in Donglin Town, Gu Yanping, the boss of Golden Hall, took good care of him and even helped him resolve a danger once. Now, seeing the sign of Golden Hall in Mist City should have made Lin Sun very happy. But when he saw more than a dozen strong men looking for trouble, Lin Sun couldn't be happy at all. Lin Sun stepped forward and glanced around. At a glance, he saw Gu Liang, who was surrounded in the depths of the crowd. Gu Liang was the son of Gu Yanping, the boss of Golden Hall. When he was in Donglin Town, he had a good relationship with Lin Sun. Seeing him here, how could Lin Sun not be sure that Golden Hall in front of him belonged to Gu Yanping? We have taken a fancy to this shop. If we tell you to get out of here, just get out. Don't talk nonsense, or I'll cut you to death, a leading man in black said with a grim smile. His face was ferocious and he looked unscrupulous. He was not afraid of causing trouble in the public at all. Obviously, he had the confidence. Friends, let's talk it out. If you need tea fees, I promise to pay them in full every month. I hope you can be merciful and let go of my shop. Although Gu Liang was young, he had obviously been honed for a long time. He was calm and composed, with a kind smile hanging on his lips. As he said, he took out a money bag and handed it over with a smile. Please accept it. The burly man in black slapped the money bag away and said disdainfully, Tea fee? Do I need it? To tell you the truth, if you don't give up this shop today, don't blame us for being rude. The strong men next to him also sneered. Gu Liang's heart suddenly sank. He knew that this was not as simple as ordinary protection fees. Someone was targeting him. Damn it, why don't you speak? Are you deaf? Seeing that Gu Liang didn't speak, a ruffian rushed out and raised his hand to slap Gu Liang's face. Gu Liang's eyes flashed. He had long suppressed a lot of anger in his heart. Seeing that the ruffian dared to bully him, he was completely enraged. But when he was about to take action, he felt that there was a blur in front of him, and there was a handsome figure in front of him. Crack! After that, the ruffian's wrist was twisted like a fried dough twist, and it hurt to the point he howled miserably without end. Lin Sun lifted his foot and kicked him away. Lin. Gu Liang never thought that he would see Lin at this moment. He was surprised and happy. Let's talk later. Lin nodded with a smile and looked at the leading man in black. Do you want to get out of here yourself, or do you want me to send you out? Good boy, you have a fucking helper. You're dead. The strong man in black was furious. Crack. But before he moved, he was slapped in the face, which made his teeth fall off, his nose and mouth bleed, and his whole body flew out severely. Seeing that Lin Sun was so powerful, the other ruffians were scared and trembled all over, realizing that the situation was not good. But someone still shouted harshly, Boy, do you know who we are representing? Let me tell you, no matter where you come from, if you dare to intervene in this matter, you will never live through tonight. Lin Sun didn't bother to talk nonsense and directly slapped him again. The guy's body spun a few times like a top, and then he fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth and unable to stand up again. This time, the other ruffians were completely panicked. They picked up their injured companions and fled in panic. Before leaving, they left some harsh words. You wait. You're completely finished. No one can save you if you dare to offend us. Lin Sun couldn't help shaking his head. These were a group of ruffians who couldn't be seen in public. He really didn't know where they got the courage to be so arrogant. Lin Sun, I didn't expect you to see such a scandal. Alas, it's really shameful. If my father was here, such a thing would never happen. Gu Liang laughed at himself. With your means, you should be able to deal with these guys. Why didn't you take action just now? Lin Sun frowned. It's not convenient to talk here. Let's go inside. Gu Liang glanced around and led Lin Sun into a quiet room in the shop and sat down. Then he said, They are just a group of small fries. I worry about the person behind all this. At the end of his words, There was a touch of worry between his eyebrows. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Do you know the identity of the person behind all this?" Gu Liang's lips curled up with a touch of helplessness. Who else can it be? It must be other businesses in Mist City. After all, if Golden Hall takes root here, they will undoubtedly have one more competitor. How can they watch all this happen? Lin Sun was speechless and said, "This is somewhat similar to the situation when your father opened Golden Hall in Donglin Town." Gu Liang also laughed and said, "Yes, but I can't compare with my father's means to establish a foothold in Donglin Town in such a short time and open up a new situation." There was a touch of pride in his voice. He had always regarded his father as an example. Lin Sun said in a low voice, "Gu Liang, do you have a specific suspect in mind? Maybe I can help you solve this problem." Gu Liang was stunned, and a touch of warmth welled up in his heart. They hadn't seen each other for more than a year, but now they met by chance in Mist City. He was a little uncertain whether Lin Sun had changed, but through these words, he knew that Lin Sun was still the same Lin Sun. Chapter 255. Gu Liang thought for a while and shook his head with a wry smile. "I've just arrived in Mist City for less than 7 days. It's hard for me to figure out who's behind all this." It turned out that Gu Liang came to Mist City this time because he was entrusted by his father, Gu Yanping, to open a golden hall in Mist City as a stronghold. When he accumulated enough strength and materials, he could expand the golden hall to the whole southwestern province. According to Gu Yanping's plan, Mist City was the capital of Southwest Province. If he could open up the market here, he would be able to attract a lot of business talents and further expand the strength of Golden Hall. But even Gu Liang didn't expect that trouble would come to him as soon as he settled in Mist City, which really made him distressed. When Lin Sun learned all this, he couldn't help sighing secretly. Gu Yanping and his son were definitely unwilling to be mediocre. In just over a year, they had set their sights on the whole southwestern province. But thinking about it, Gu Yanping was indeed a rare and powerful figure according to the business means he had shown in the past. Gu Liang seemed to feel that the topic was a little dull, so he said with a smile, "By the way, I heard a lot about you when I entered Mist City this time. Your reputation is so resounding that it can be said to be like the sun at high noon. Everyone knows you. I almost doubt whether it is you or not." There was a touch of heartfelt amazement in his voice. It had only been more than a year since he saw Lin Sun, but Lin Sun had already made such remarkable achievements. Compared with himself, a group of local ruffians came to make trouble even when he settled in Mist City. All this made Gu Liang sigh with emotion. What on earth had happened to Lin Sun in the past year that made him achieve what he had today? It's just an undeserved reputation. Lin Sun shrugged and said, "People are afraid of fame as pigs are afraid of being fat. The more famous one is, the more trouble there will be." Gu Liang laughed heartily. "The reputation that others yearn for has become a problem for you. You are indeed different from the rest." Lin Sun smiled and said, "Let's not talk about this. Are you going to stay in Mist City all the time?" Gu Liang nodded and said, "If I can overcome the current difficulties and completely establish Golden Hall in Mist City, I will definitely not leave in a short time." Speaking of this, he suddenly smiled mysteriously and said, "Lin Sun, although you have made more progress than me in the past year, when the power of Golden Hall develops in the future, I will not be too inferior to you." Without waiting for Lin Sun to speak, he continued, "According to my father's plan, if we want to develop Golden Hall into a famous first-class business in the Empire, we can't take the usual way. Now, my father has found this way." Lin Sun couldn't help asking, "What way?" Gu Liang smiled. "You'll know in the future. If this path can be taken, I won't be left behind by you in the future." Lin Sun laughed and scolded, "It's the same as not saying anything." Gu Liang chuckled and said, "In short, I can guarantee that if everything goes well, the power of Golden Hall is destined to flourish everywhere in the Empire, and even expand to further places in the Empire." As he spoke up to hear, his eyes were filled with bright longing. Lin Sun was shocked. Expand beyond the empire? Gu Yanping was really bold. If so, wouldn't Golden Hall become a huge force like Keystone Business in the future? Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside, interrupting the reunion of old friends. Where's the shop owner? Get out. And the guy who just hurt people, come out quickly! Obviously, the ruffians came back aggressively and seemed to be full of confidence. Obviously, they had found helpers. Lin Sun got up and said, "Let's go out and have a look." Gu Liang reminded with a worried look, "Lin Sun, I know you are famous now, but in Mist City, all kinds of forces are complicated. Don't be impulsive. Even if the shop is smashed this time, as long as you are alive, you will eventually have a chance to fight back." Before he finished, he was helplessly interrupted by Lin Sun. "Well, let's go." Gu Liang wanted to say something more, but was dragged out of the quiet room by Lin Sun. In front of the shop, a group of ruffians surrounded it, each of them looking fierce. The leading man in black was also there, but his cheeks were red and swollen like a pig's head, which looked very funny. But at this time, they were not the protagonist. The protagonist was an old man with a goatee, who was sitting leisurely on a chair in the shop with his eyes closed, looking arrogant. When Lin Sun and Gu Liang came out, the man in black suddenly showed resentment in his eyes. He pointed to Lin Sun and shouted, "Old Qian, it's that guy who intervened in this matter. If it weren't for him, we would have succeeded." The ruffians also shouted, "Yes, it's that bastard. He is so abominable that he doesn't take our Azure Light Pavilion seriously at all." Azure Light Pavilion. Gu Liang's face suddenly changed. Even if he didn't know much about Mist City, he knew that Azure Light Pavilion was a first-class force in the city. What he never expected was that it was Azure Light Pavilion who targeted him this time. This was too unexpected. How could Golden Hall offend Azure Light Pavilion before it took root in Mist City? When Lin Sun heard Azure Light Pavilion, a strange light flashed in his eyes, and his lips raised a faint curve. He said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to be so courageous. You even dare to bring people back to kill us. You're courting death. How dare you be so presumptuous in front of old Qian? You're dead. Boy, don't blame us for not telling you that old Qian is a master of Azure Light Pavilion. If you don't want to die, quickly kneel down and apologize." The ruffians scolded angrily. "Lin Sun, don't be impulsive. We can't afford to offend Azure Light Pavilion. Let me deal with this matter." Gu Liang was worried. He was afraid that Lin Sun would be impulsive, so he quickly reminded Lin Sun in a low voice. Seeing this, all the ruffians laughed with complacency and resentment on their faces. If they had known this, why did they do it in the first place? However, Lin Sun smiled more brightly and said, "You really found the right person to threaten me with Azure Light Pavilion. Say no more. Who is old Qian? Stand out and let me know you." The old man with a goatee was sitting there, but Lin Sun ignored him. This arrogant look made all the ruffians furious. They wanted to kill the boy in front of them. Gu Liang felt helpless. He knew that he couldn't persuade Lin Sun at all. But at this moment, he had to go all out. At worst, he would make trouble with Lin Sun, and then choose another opportunity to go back to Mist City. At this time, the arrogant old man with a goatee, who had been closing his eyes to rest and was called Old Qian by those ruffians, suddenly snorted coldly. "Young man, it's not good to be too angry. I've given you the opportunity, but you don't take it well. Then don't blame me." Old Qian's voice was low and deep, and it was filled with undisguised coldness. As he spoke, he opened his eyes that had been closed for a long time. But, when he saw Lin Sun, his eyes suddenly popped out as if he had seen a ghost, and his voice stopped abruptly. When those ruffians saw old Qian speak with indescribable majesty, they couldn't help but feel refreshed. Old Qian was indeed worthy of his title. His words didn't contain any dirty words at all, but they carried an invisible oppressive force. Brilliant, really brilliant. They still didn't notice that Elder Qian, who could only be described as a high mountain in their hearts, was currently surging endlessly like raging waves in his heart, and his mind felt as if it had been struck by lightning, causing him to feel dizzy. How could it be this guy? Old Qian's expression was sluggish. His mind naturally recalled the massacre that happened on that rainy night a few days ago, as well as the pinnacle duel that happened in the arena. Why? Why could he meet this devil here? Old Qian's lips couldn't help twitching. If those big shots in Azure Light Pavilion knew that he had provoked this devil, the consequences would be unimaginable. Why don't you speak? Lin Sun looked at Old Qian with a smile. At a glance, he could see that the old guy was completely listless. Elder Qian's lips trembled. Just as he was about to speak, the black-shirt macho man scolded him first. Good, you reckless thing. At this time, you still dare to disrespect Elder Qian. It's like drinking arsenic. You're tired of living. Slap. Old Qian couldn't help but stand up and slap the black-clothed man hard in the face. The sound was clear and loud. The black-clothed man covered his cheek and screamed, looking at Old Qian incredulously. His companions were also stunned by this sudden scene. Old Qian, did you hit the wrong person? The black-clothed man asked innocently. That's what I want to beat up, you blind fool. Old Qian trembled with anger. He raised his hand and slapped the black-clothed man again. He vented his anger on the black-clothed man, making him wail and beg for mercy. The ruffians next to him were shocked and horrified. Looking at the crazy Old Qian, they finally realized that they seemed to have provoked someone they shouldn't have provoked this time. Gu Liang had made up his mind to make a scene with Lin Sun. Who would have thought that he would see such a good show of dog biting dog? He couldn't help but be stunned. What the hell was going on? He couldn't help but look at Lin Sun. Seeing Lin Sun watching all this with a smile, he vaguely understood something and was shocked. He didn't expect that Lin Sun had such power now. And you, kneel down and apologize to Child Lin. After fighting for a long time, Old Qian was also tired. If he continued to fight, someone would die. So Old Qian directly glared at those ruffians and ordered them to apologize to Lin Sun. What a joke! If he couldn't get the forgiveness of this devil today, the consequences would be so serious that even he couldn't afford it. With a series of thuds, those ruffians suddenly knelt down. They had already been frightened. How could they dare to hesitate at this moment? Didn't they see that Old Qian's face was pale with fear? Chapter 256. Looking at the figures kneeling on the ground, Gu Liang couldn't help but gasp. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't say any harsh words at all, but forced these ruffians to kneel down and apologize. His power was too strong. But this was not the end. Lin Sun didn't even look at the ruffians kneeling on the ground, but looked at the uneasy Old Qian. As soon as Lin Sun opened his mouth, the old guy also knelt on the ground and said bitterly, I know my mistake. Child, please forgive me and let me go this time. Lin Sun slightly raised the corner of his mouth. This old guy was really shrewd. He completely lowered his attitude, which made Lin Sun feel a little sorry to trouble him again. Gu Liang was completely shocked at this moment. The ruffian knelt on the ground, but the old man with a goatee was a member of Azure Light Pavilion. But now, even he directly knelt down, which seemed too incredible. Gu Liang didn't know that after that night of fighting in the rain, Lin Sun had already become the most feared opponent of more than a dozen forces in the city. Even Qi Yunxiao, the young master of Azure Light Pavilion, suffered a lot in Lin Sun's hands, let alone Old Qian in front of him. Speaking of which, Old Qian was not an important role. He was just a steward of Azure Light Pavilion. There were a lot of people like him in Azure Light Pavilion, and only those ruffians would treat him as a big shot. Tell me what's going on. Lin Sun sat in the chair and asked casually. Old Qian shivered all over and his face was pale. He thought that Lin Sun still didn't intend to let him go. He gritted his teeth and reached out to slap his old face. The slap was crisp and loud, and soon his thin cheeks were red and swollen. "I know I'm wrong. Child, please forgive me," old Chien begged as he slapped himself. He knew very well that if Lin Sun didn't forgive him, Azure Light Pavilion would definitely dare to eat him alive. Whether for his own future or to save his life, he had to do so. He had seen Lin Sun's means. This guy seemed to be young and looked harmless and handsome, but anyone who knew him would know that he was a killer who killed people without blinking an eye. Nowadays, among more than a dozen forces in Mist City, Lin Sun's name was like a taboo. Who dared to make trouble for him? He must be tired of living. Gu Liang was stunned. The ruffians kneeling on the ground were also stunned. Was this the old Chien they knew? "Well, I just want to know why you want to deal with Golden Hall. Make it clear, and you can leave." Lin Sun glanced at old Chien. When old Chien heard this, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. As long as he could live, so what if he was embarrassed? "Young master, this is actually a misunderstanding." Elder Chien took a deep breath and explained, "If I knew that Golden Hall has something to do with you, I wouldn't dare to send people here to make a scene." It turned out that before Gu Liang rented this shop, Elder Chien had also taken a liking to this shop, but he was a step too late. He had originally given up, but who would have thought that after a little investigation, he would find out that the person who rented this shop, Gu Liang, was an outsider and was also a young boy. Thus, the following matters were simple. Elder Chien used the power in his hands to send a group of hooligans to find trouble with him. He wanted to drive Gu Liang away and take the shop for himself. But he never expected that the outsider, Gu Liang, who was easy to bully in his eyes, actually knew Lin Sun. Knowing all this, Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. He thought that Azure Light Pavilion had realized Gu Yanping's ability, so they sent their forces to prevent Golden Hall from gaining a foothold in Mist City. Who would have thought that the reason was so strange? Gu Liang was completely relieved when he learned all this. As long as Azure Light Pavilion didn't target him, it would be easy to deal with it. "Go away." Lin Sun waved his hand. Old Chien was stunned. It seemed that he couldn't believe that Lin Sun would let him go so easily. He couldn't help asking, "Young master, you really don't care about my mistakes anymore?" Lin Sun said angrily, "Go away. Don't blame me for beating you if you don't go away." This time, old Chien was finally completely relieved. He got up and ran away with the group of hooligans. "It's time for me to go. If you encounter any trouble in the future, be sure to find me. Of course, the premise is that I am still in Mist City." Lin Sun got up, told Gu Liang his address with a smile, and was about to leave. Gu Liang called out, "Wait." Lin Sun was stunned. "Is there anything else?" Gu Liang seemed to hesitate in his heart. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Lin Sun, since we are friends, I will tell you directly. I want to invite you to join Golden Hall. In the future, you will also have a share of Golden Hall's income." Lin Sun was stunned. "Why do you want to do this?" Gu Liang said impatiently, "There is no reason. I just want to do this. Tell me whether you agree or not. Of course, I know that you are a busy man and will definitely not develop business with me. I won't force you. You just need to be a nominal member. If you don't want to be known by others, I can keep it a secret for you." After saying so much, Lin Sun suddenly understood that Gu Liang was trying to give him benefits. "You really don't have to do this," Lin Sun said helplessly. "Since we are friends, it is natural for us to support each other." Gu Liang said seriously, "Lin Sun, do you look down on Golden Hall? Do you think it is useless to join Golden Hall?" Lin Sun was completely convinced. He knew that Gu Liang was goading him, but he had to admit that this trick was really useful. At least, he didn't know what to say. "Well, I have a batch of spiritual materials here. Just take it that I am a shareholder of Golden Hall." Lin Sun said, took out a storage bag and handed it to Gu Liang. "Take it. If you don't accept it, I won't join." Gu Liang glared at Lin Sun angrily. He didn't expect that Lin Sun would play such a trick on him, but he had no choice but to accept it. Well, whether Golden Hall can rise in the Empire in the future depends on you. I am only responsible for a nominal member. Lin Sun teased Gu Liang with a smile, and strode out of Golden Hall. But when he walked on the street, he couldn't help turning his head to look at the signboard of Golden Hall. He couldn't help thinking that one day, Golden Hall could rise like a comet and become the first business force in the Empire. Immediately, Lin Sun shook his head and disappeared in the vast crowd. That guy is really the same as before. In the shop, thinking of what had just happened, Gu Liang couldn't help feeling warm. He didn't regret his decision just now. Even if his father Gu Yanping knew it, he would do it resolutely. Gu Liang knew that Lin Sun was a pure practitioner. Lin Sun's path was completely different from his, and it was even impossible for Lin Sun to help Golden Hall in the future. But did it matter? Not at all. At least for Gu Liang, it was not a big deal to give some of Golden Hall's income to Lin Sun. After all, Lin Sun was his friend. As the saying goes, if you treat me as a national scholar, I will treat you as a national scholar. After a while, Gu Liang played with the storage bag left by Lin Sun. He intended to put it away, but after thinking about it, he opened it and took a look. Just a glance made Gu Liang stunned. Silver plume snow whalebone, netherworld fire lamp grass, 9-turn geocentric iron. Gu Liang couldn't imagine that there were dozens of rare spiritual materials in the storage bag left by Lin Sun casually. Each kind of spiritual material could definitely be sold at a sky-high price on the market. How much would the total value of these dozens of spiritual materials be? As a commercial practitioner, Gu Liang soon roughly calculated an astronomical figure in his mind, which was at least no less than 100,000 gold coins. If it was done well, it could even be sold at a higher price. And this price was enough to buy all the properties of Golden Hall that Gu Liang and his father, Gu Yanping, had built up. This guy actually left such an amazing wealth so casually. Gu Liang sat there in a daze, his mood fluctuating. He didn't know what to say to Lin Sun. After a long time, Gu Liang took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the fluctuations in his heart. His eyes had become bright and firm. Since you dare to throw a lot of money at me, how can I live up to your trust if I don't develop Golden Hall into a world-famous first-class business? Lin Sun, wait for me. I will give you an unexpected return in the future. Those spiritual materials were naturally given to Lin Sun by Granny Wind for repairing the ancient rhythm ocarina. But in order to vent his anger, Lin Sun didn't need most of the spiritual materials he asked for, so he gave them to Gu Liang casually. These spiritual materials were very expensive. As for how expensive they were, Lin Sun couldn't tell the specific figure. But now he was not short of money, so it was worth it to invest in Golden Hall. Of course, if Golden Hall really rose in the Empire in the future and completely developed into a first-class business force, Gu Liang would definitely share more profits with him, according to his character. Even if Golden Hall failed to develop and completely closed down, it didn't matter. He didn't take out these spiritual materials to make money. In the final analysis, the reason why Lin Sun did this was largely because of Gu Yanping. If Gu Yanping hadn't personally helped him guard the gate and resist the enemy in Donglin town, he and Xia Ji would probably have been killed. How could Lin Sun forget such a life-saving grace? Of course, Gu Liang regarded him as a friend, which Lin Sun could also feel. Since Gu Liang invited him to join Golden Hall and gave him benefits only in name, Lin Sun naturally wouldn't let Gu Liang suffer losses. When he returned home, Lin Sun had already put this matter behind him. From today on, he planned to refine his cultivation wholeheartedly and prepare for the third test of the Hall of Green Cloud that would be opened in a month. In his mind, every challenge in the heaven-accessing secret land was a rare opportunity. He had to grasp it firmly and not allow any mistakes to occur. Chapter 257. The most tragic thing was that my friend's car was also flooded and broke down. As a northerner, this was the first time in years that I had encountered such a violent downpour. It was an eye-opening experience,